Chapter 165. Yun Ruoyan kept thinking about the opportunity that Xiao had mentioned. One day she called her brother over to her cottage and requested to spar with him. Yun Maxiao's cultivation was higher than Yun Ruoyan's, so Yun Ruoyan wasn't afraid of injuring him. She pushed her cultivation to the limit, using her spiritual energy as if it were free. Yun Maxiao couldn't understand why his sister was suddenly using her spiritual energy like a madwoman, and each strike was so vicious that he couldn't help but wonder if he had somehow offended her. But it didn't seem like he had. Ever since his return, he had doted on Yun Ruoyan, wanting nothing more than to make up for everything that he had owed her all these years. How could he bear to offend her? "Brother, what are you thinking about? Be more serious." Yun Ruoyan was very displeased that her brother had been so distracted even in a fight with her. Yun Maxiao's cultivation was higher than Yun Ruoyan's, and he had more combat experience than her, so even when he was distracted he wouldn't be at a disadvantage. After being yelled at by Yun Ruoyan, Yun Maxiao became more serious, pointing out the flaws in Yun Ruoyan's techniques as he fought, as well as teaching her how to use her spiritual energy. Although Yun Ruoyan didn't feel any signs of a breakthrough after the fight, she did gain some insights from her battle experience. Xilan brought over some phoenix stamen tea for Yun Ruoyan and Yun Maxiao to quench their thirst. The siblings sat on a stone bench in the courtyard, sipping their tea quietly. Yun Maxiao sipped his tea as he breathed, while Yun Ruoyan spoke to Xiao in her mind. "Xiao, I've already given it my all. Why isn't it working?" Yun Ruoyan asked. If Yun Ruoyan were to enter her pocket dimension right now, she would see Xiao's speechless expression. "Mistress, you've misunderstood me," Xiao explained patiently. "By giving it your all, I'm referring to a battle to the death, just like the battle you had with Wang Kuang in the imperial territory." Yun Ruoyan instantly understood that Xiao was referring to a battle to the death, but she really didn't have such an opportunity at the moment. "Mistress, don't worry. There'll be a trial not long after you enter Kongming Academy, and it's said to be even crueler than the imperial territory. Master will definitely have a chance to fight to the death," Xiao said. All along it had been said that passing the imperial territory granted one the right to enter Kongming Academy, but that wasn't entirely accurate. The imperial territory was only the first time that Kongming Academy was selecting students from all over the Qinyuan continent. After entering Kongming Academy, the trial that was about to begin was the true selection for Kongming Academy. Only by passing this trial would one truly become a student of Kongming Academy and participate in the selection ceremony. "Brother." When he heard Yun Ruoyan call out to him, he turned to look at her. "Why didn't you enter Kongming Academy back then?" Yun Ruoyan asked. With his talent, it wouldn't have been difficult for him to enter Kongming Academy. "My master won't allow it." Like all the scions of the Qinyuan continent, Yun Maxiao yearned for Kongming Academy. However, his master General Huang didn't want Yun Maxiao to go. Instead, he convinced Yun Lan to let General Huang personally teach Yun Maxiao cultivation. "But given my master's cultivation, I'm sure he's no weaker than any of the instructors at Kongming Academy, so it'd be a good idea to train with him." Yun Maxiao said, "I'm just a little curious, what does the temple that everyone yearns for look like? It must be very spectacular." Kongming Academy was located at the top of the Kongming Peak, and most people weren't allowed there. As a result, not being able to see Kongming Academy with his own eyes was one of Yun Maxiao's greatest regrets. "It really is spectacular." Yun Ruoyan thought back to that night when Li Mo had brought her to the top of the academy's tower to watch the sunrise. There she had seen something she had never seen before. "Ruoyan, you speak as if you've seen it before." Yun Maxiao smiled. Yun Ruoyan smiled as well. "It must be spectacular." Just as the siblings were chatting and laughing, a servant came to invite Yun Ruoyan and Yun Maxiao to the Great Hall, informing them that Kongming Academy's enrollment list had been released, and that they should head there immediately to pay their respects to Envoy Ding. When the siblings arrived at the Great Hall, Yun Ruoyao, Yun Ruoyu and Yi Qianying were all present. Envoy Ding and Yun Lan sat together at the head of the table, chatting and laughing. Once everyone was present, Envoy Ding read out the enrollment list of the Yun family's juniors. Unsurprisingly, all of them had been accepted. Envoy Ding then handed back the wooden tokens that had been given to them by the guards when they left the imperial territory. However, the color of the tokens had changed. They were all crimson. Envoy Ding didn't explain this and no one questioned him about it. It was only later that Yun Ruoyan learned that these tokens would be their identity tokens. The color represented their rank. Crimson was the lowest rank, green was the middle rank and purple was the highest. After completing his mission, Envoy Ding had to head to the next residence, and Yun Lan and the others sent him off. Envoy Ding's gaze lingered on Yun Ruoyan for a moment longer. He was a little confused as to why the Yun Ruoyan in front of him was so different from the one he remembered. Emissary Ding was lost in thought as he walked and almost tripped over the high threshold. Yun Maxiao, who was walking behind him, reached out to support him in time, but the emissary withdrew his hand as if nothing had happened. Emissary Ding couldn't help but look at Yun Maxiao. He thought to himself that the Yun siblings weren't ordinary people. After sending off Envoy Ding, the group returned to the Great Hall to await Yun Lan's instructions. As usual, Yun Lan gave a few words of encouragement, then brought up Yi Qianying's marriage. Yun Lan said that the Yi family had repeatedly requested that Yi Qianying return to the Yi household to await her marriage. Although Yi Qianying had grown up in the Yun household, her name wasn't on the Yun family's genealogy, and it would be inappropriate for her to remain in the Yun household to await her marriage. Yun Lan's intention was to avoid gossip and have Yi Qianying return to the Yi household to await her marriage. Yi Qianying naturally obeyed Yun Lan's arrangements, and she even stated that no matter where she was married, the Yun household would always be her only home. Yun Lan was very pleased by her words. Yi Qianying returned to the Yi household that very day. Without having to worry about her marriage, the Yun household was as peaceful as ever. The next day, when Yun Ruoyan and Yun Maxiao went to the Lin household, they found out that Zhou Lin's name wasn't on the list of students accepted into Kongming Academy. Zhou Yifeng angrily demanded an explanation from Envoy Ding, who said that Zhou Lin's constitution was too weak, and that even if she were to enter Kongming Academy now, she wouldn't be able to withstand the next series of trials. In fact, she might even lose her life, and it was for her own good that she wasn't allowed to enter. Seeing that Envoy Ding's words were reasonable, everyone persuaded Zhou Yifeng not to take it to heart, and Zhou Lin herself also gave up on the idea of entering Kongming Academy. Zhou Yifeng had finally gotten this opportunity and Zhou Lin didn't want to burden him. As a result, when Yun Ruoyan walked into the pavilion, Zhou Yifeng's expression was cold. This time it wasn't because of Yun Ruoyan, but rather because he couldn't accept the fact that he was about to be separated from Zhou Lin. But when he thought of how Kongming Academy was the only place where he could grow stronger, he began to feel conflicted. Brother Zhou, you don't have to worry about Lin Qingxue replied. Lin won't be in any danger in the Lin household. My sister and I won't be around anymore and Lin can still keep my grandfather company. My grandfather is much better at nurturing people's health than my sister, and by the time you leave Kongming Academy, I'm sure Lin will look even better than she does now. Brother, don't worry, Zhou Lin added. Even if all of you leave, the beasts in the bamboo garden will still be able to keep me company. Finally, Zhou Yifeng's expression softened. Yun Ruoyan called Zhou Yifeng to the side and handed him the box containing the tiger canine arrowheads. When she had first received the arrowheads, she had wanted to give them to Zhou Yifeng, but she hadn't had the time before and then Li Mo's incident. Yun Ruoyan knew that Zhou Yifeng wouldn't accept her goodwill, so she hadn't brought it up. Yun Ruoyan felt that today was a good day, so she handed over the tiger canine arrowheads to Zhou Yifeng, relieving one of her worries. Zhou Yifeng looked at the tiger canine arrowheads neatly arranged in the box, feeling very excited. He touched each arrowhead with his hand. This wasn't just a simple caress, but a kind of emotional exchange. The more Zhou Yifeng touched the arrowheads, the more he liked them. The more he touched them, the more certain he was that they had been specially made for him. As a result, Zhou Yifeng didn't feel the slightest bit grateful to Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan thought that Zhou Yifeng would awkwardly thank her, but to her surprise he only said, "That's great, I like it." Then he hugged the box and walked off to the side. As Yun Ruoyan looked at Zhou Yifeng's back, she swallowed the words that were on the tip of her tongue. But this was good. Yun Ruoyan smiled faintly. As she left the Lin Manor, she unexpectedly ran into someone at the gates. Pei Zio. Just as Yun Ruoyan was about to board the carriage, Pei Zio appeared out of nowhere and blocked her path. Seeing that he had come with ill intentions, Yun Maxiao immediately shielded Yun Ruoyan behind him. Looking past Yun Maxiao, Yun Ruoyan saw Pei Zio standing in front of her. His figure was thin, his face sunken, and his expression ugly. It seemed like he hadn't been having a good time recently. Yun Ruoyan laughed coldly in her heart. Move aside, I have something to ask Yun Ruoyan, Pei Zhou said to Yun Moxiao. Young Master Pei, if you have anything to say you can say it here. Yun Moxiao didn't budge. Pei Zhou stood out from the crowd, but when he stood in front of Yun Moxiao, his aura paled in comparison. After a moment of silence, Pei Zhou finally asked, "Was it you who did it?" "What do you mean, did I do it? I don't understand what you're talking about." Yun Ruoyan naturally knew what Pei Zhou was referring to, but she had to play dumb. "Young Master Pei, you don't seem to be in good spirits. I suggest you go to the apothecary and grab a few sedative pills." Chapter 166. By this time, Pei Zhou's murder at the Yichuan brothel had become a well-known fact in the capital. What was most talked about wasn't the murder, but the fact that he had bought an ugly woman to spend a night with. Many people could kill a few underrated thugs, but not everyone could sleep with a peerlessly ugly woman for a night of pleasure. The Pei family spent some money to get Pei Zhou out of prison without much effort. Pei Zhou hid at home these days, not daring to go out. He felt that everyone was looking at him as if he were an idiot with strange smiles on their faces. Pei Yingxiong discovered that the tiger canine arrowheads, a high-grade spiritual pill, and a mid-grade spiritual pill were missing. He gathered all of his servants to investigate, and all the clues pointed to Pei Zhou. Pei Zhou confessed to Pei Yingxiong that he had taken those items, but although he had that memory, he didn't have any self-awareness. Just like in the Yichuan brothel, it was as if someone had been manipulating him to do those things, and he could only allow himself to be manipulated like a puppet. Pei Yingxiong asked Pei Zhou where he had taken those items as well as where he had been before going to the Yichuan brothel, but Pei Zhou's mind seemed to have been cut off, and he couldn't remember anything about that. Pei Yingxiong's heart ached for his son, and he didn't press Pei Zhou for answers. Instead, he told him to rest and to investigate the culprit. Pei Zhou, on the other hand, swore to himself that he would find the culprit with his own hands. After Pei Yingxiong left, Pei Zhou began to think back to when he had lost his self-awareness, and based on that train of thought he went through all of his actions over the past few days. Following his memory, he went to the secret chamber where the Pei family kept their spiritual pills and treasures, exited the chamber and left the Pei manor. Pei Zhou remembered that he hadn't taken a carriage, but had instead walked along the streets. 2 hours later he arrived at the Lin Manor's main gates. But it was here that Pei Zhou's memory went blank. When he regained it, he was already at the Yichuan brothel. In that case, what had he done between here and the Yichuan brothel? Pei Zhou racked his brains, but he couldn't remember anything. Pei Zhou remembered that he had lost his self-awareness in the Yuelu Villa's immortal abode. He had clearly been with Yun Ruoyan, but by the time he regained his memory, Yun Ruoyan had disappeared. And the Lin family seemed to be connected to Yun Ruoyan in some way. Pei Zhou couldn't help but suspect Yun Ruoyan. Other than Yun Ruoyan, Pei Zhou couldn't think of anyone else who would do such a thing to him. But why would Yun Ruoyan do this to him? Ever since leaving the imperial territory, he had been extremely attentive to Yun Ruoyan. Even if Yun Ruoyan didn't like him, there was no reason for her to harm him like this. Just then, Pei Zhou saw Yun Ruoyan walk out of the Lin Manor. Anxious to resolve his doubts, he rushed up to her and blocked her path. "Yun Ruoyan, that day when I invited you to eat at the Xianxia restaurant, you suddenly disappeared. From that moment on, I became muddled and confused, and later on I did many ridiculous things. Other than you, I really can't think of anyone else who would have the opportunity to harm me," Pei Zhou said with an agitated expression. Yun Ruoyan had already predicted that Pei Zhou would grow suspicious of her. She had even discussed this with Xianxia, and Xianxia had concluded that the soul-stealing pill's third flaw was that, although the poisoned person had no self-awareness, they still retained their memories. If they weren't careful when administering the poison, they could easily expose themselves. This time, Yun Ruoyan shouldn't have had Pei Zhou deliver the pill to the Lin Manor. Instead, she should have chosen a more secluded location. When Yun Ruoyan had given the order, Xianxia had been in the middle of cultivating, so Yun Ruoyan had made a rudimentary mistake. What Yun Ruoyan needed to do now was to fix this problem. If young Master Pei hadn't mentioned it, I wouldn't have mentioned it. Yun Ruoyan didn't feel the slightest bit guilty. Instead, she looked angry. "That day you tricked me into drinking the immortal's intoxication. What were your intentions?" Yun Ruoyan's rebuttal left Pei Xiao stunned. I didn't want to do anything. Pei Xiao was one of the more mature of his age group and he was quite shrewd. However, in front of Yun Ruoyan who had lived 2 lives he was far too inexperienced. Didn't want to do anything? Yun Ruoyan repeated Pei Xiao's words. Then why didn't you tell me that I'd be drunk after 3 cups? Why did you keep trying to get me to drink? Yun Maxiao also noticed that something was amiss. He glared at Pei Xiao, his heart filled with rage. If Yun Ruoyan hadn't brought up this matter, Pei Xiao would have forgotten that he had tried to use the drunken immortal to get her drunk and then do that unspeakable thing to her, hoping to make her his. Now that Yun Ruoyan had brought it up, Pei Xiao couldn't help but feel even more guilty. Because he hadn't been able to focus these past few days, he couldn't hide his guilt. But I didn't do anything. Pei Xiao argued loudly. You didn't do anything. Yun Ruoyan looked at Pei Xiao disdainfully. That's because the slaughtering king suddenly appeared and took me away. If not for him I can't imagine what would have happened next. Yun Ruoyan's sudden mention of Li Mo gave Pei Xiao a shock. The slaughtering king? You were actually taken away by the slaughtering king. Yun Maxiao couldn't restrain his anger. He stepped forward and grabbed Pei Xiao by the collar, almost lifting him off the ground. Yun Maxiao thought back to that morning when the slaughtering king had escorted Yun Ruoyan back to her cottage. At the time he'd thought it strange that Yun Ruoyan had left with Pei Xiao, so why had the slaughtering king been the one to escort her back? If not for the slaughtering king's timely arrival, my sister's chastity would have been ruined by you. Yun Maxiao roared, throwing Pei Xiao to the ground and raising his leg to kick him. Yun Ruoyan grabbed her brother from behind. Brother, don't hit him, he'll dirty your shoes. Pei Xiao lay on the ground in a daze. Could it be that the slaughtering king made me do all these things to punish me? Pei Xiao thought despairingly. If the culprit really was the slaughtering king, then he could only grit his teeth and bear the consequences. Young Master Pei. Yun Ruoyan walked up to Pei Xiao's side and looked down at him. I don't know who did this to you, but I don't mind telling you this. That day when you suddenly came to the Lin Manor, you handed me the tiger canine arrowheads and 2 spiritual pills without a word, then turned to leave. You didn't seem normal at the time. After hearing Yun Ruoyan's words, Pei Xiao was even more convinced that the culprit was the slaughtering king. He was also aware of the complicated relationship between the 2 of them. At first, Pei Xiao had thought that a virtuous woman was the perfect match for a gentleman. Since the slaughtering king hadn't announced to the world that Yun Ruoyan was under his name, then anyone could fight for her in their own way. But now, Pei Xiao regretted his decision. Some people couldn't have any improper thoughts about what they wanted, or else they would suffer a tragic fate. Yun Ruoyan looked at Pei Xiao's dazed expression and confirmed that he was thinking along her lines. But those 3 items were agreed upon between you and me. Even if you didn't want them, I wouldn't have returned them to you, Yun Ruoyan continued. Take care, young Master Pei. I won't accompany you any longer. Brother, let's go. Yun Ruoyan led the way into the carriage. Yun Maxiao turned around and pointed at Pei Xiao. Remember, my sister isn't someone a despicable person like you can lay a finger on. The carriage whizzed past Pei Xiao's side, and he stared dumbly as it disappeared down the street. In the future, stay as far away from despicable people like him as possible. On the carriage, Yun Maxiao began lecturing Yun Ruoyan. After I returned this time, I clearly felt that you'd gotten smarter. How could you have fallen for Pei Xiao's tricks? You dare to drink anyone's wine, you're really amazing. Yun Ruoyan looked at her brother's dark expression and knew that he was only so angry because he was worried about her. It felt good to be cared for and cared for by someone. Yun Ruoyan's heart warmed. In the future, without me by your side, don't accept anyone's invitation to a meal or a drink, do you hear me? Yes, brother. Yun Ruoyan tugged at her brother's arm. Brother, are you really not leaving? Yes, I'm not leaving. Yun Maxiao patted Yun Ruoyan's head. Silly sister, I have to stay by your side until you're married. Despite his words, Yun Maxiao was a little worried. The golden bald eagle had returned, but there was no reply from General Huang. Yun Maxiao waited for a long time, but there was still no news from General Huang. Was it because his master didn't agree, or was something else holding him up? Yun Maxiao didn't know. That night, Yun Maxiao wrote another letter to General Huang. When he whistled to the sky to summon his bald eagle, a snowy white eagle appeared on the horizon. It was the beast of Yun Maxiao's master, General Huang. Snow Eagle, long time no see. Is my master doing well? Yun Ma Xiao called out to the eagle excitedly. The eagle circled above his head twice and cried out thrice, indicating that he was doing well. Then the eagle swooped down toward Yun Ma Xiao, who reached out to catch it with his bracer. Yun Ma Xiao retrieved the letter General Huang had written to him from the eagle's claws. The gist of the letter was that he felt sorry for Yun Ma Xiao's decision, but after careful consideration he had decided to understand and respect Yun Ma Xiao's decision. He urged Yun Ma Xiao to continue cultivating diligently, and when Yun Ma Xiao returned home before the new year he would be tested on his cultivation. Yun Ma Xiao felt as if a large stone had been lifted from his heart when he received General Huang's letter. He replied to General Huang, thanking his master for his understanding, and promising that he wouldn't disappoint him. After writing his reply, Yun Ma Xiao lay on his bed and began to think of a suitable time to inform Yun Lan of his decision to not return to the barracks. Yun Ma Xiao could only imagine how furious Yun Lan would be when he told him about this. But what Yun Ma Xiao didn't expect was that when he received General Huang's letter, Yun Lan also received a handwritten letter from General Huang. In the study, Yun Ma Xiao received the letter from Lao Wu. Master, this letter was delivered directly from the northern military camp. You may leave. Yun Lan opened the envelope and unfolded the letter. The more he read, the wider his eyes became. With a bang, Yun Lan slammed the letter on the table and shouted towards the outside, "Someone hurry up and call the young master over." Chapter 167. Just as Yun Ma Xiao was lying on his bed, contemplating how to deal with his father, a servant knocked on his door. "Young master, the master wishes for you to go to his study." "Understood, I'll be right there." Yun Ma Xiao immediately got up from his bed. Yun Lan usually wouldn't call for him unless there was something important to discuss with him. As soon as Yun Ma Xiao stepped through the door, Yun Lan barked, "How dare you? You didn't even discuss such an important matter with me when you didn't return to the barracks. Do you have no respect for your father anymore?" "I wouldn't dare," Yun Ma Xiao replied solemnly. "I was just about to discuss this matter with you, father, but I couldn't find the right opportunity to do so. I didn't expect you to find out about it." Yun Ma Xiao was quite surprised as well. How did Yun Lan know about this matter? It seemed that he had only told his master and Yun Ruoyan about his decision. Yun Ruoyan definitely wouldn't have told him. Could it be his master? Yun Ma Xiao frowned and a bitter expression appeared on his face. "Master, aren't you causing trouble for me? Look at this letter." Yun Lan slapped a piece of paper in front of Yun Ma Xiao. Yun Ma Xiao opened it and saw that it was indeed General Huang's handwriting. It turned out that General Huang thought that Yun Lan was aware of Yun Ma Xiao's decision. After expressing his regret, he recommended Yun Ma Xiao to Yun Lan. Although Yun Lan was a civil official, he was in charge of appointing and transferring officials within the capital. General Huang had recommended Yun Ma Xiao to be the general of the capital's garrison, and informed Yun Lan that he had already submitted the recommendation letter to the court. Although Yun Lan had considerable authority, Yun Ma Xiao was his son, and his position as the general of the capital's garrison was comparable to that of a third-rank official. Yun Ma Xiao was still young, and even if he was capable, he lacked experience. The court was different from the military. The military only looked at ability, while the bureaucracy looked at experience, connections, and all sorts of complicated relationships. Yun Lan had been in the limelight for the past few years, and if he were to suddenly promote his son to such a high position, he would undoubtedly attract the displeasure of those who weren't on good terms with him. That Uncle Rong, who had a grudge with the Yun family, would be the first to make a fuss. However, with General Huang's personal recommendation, things would probably be more reasonable. Yun Ma Xiao saw that although Yun Lan's face was dark, he didn't reprimand him too harshly, nor did he order him to return to camp immediately. This made Yun Ma Xiao's tense heart relax a little. "Father, since master has agreed, you won't object, right?" Yun Ma Xiao asked tentatively. Yun Lan snorted. "Acting first and disregarding your elders, is that what you've learned in the army? When I have the chance, I'll ask your master about this. This has nothing to do with my master. I acted on my own," Yun Ma Xiao hurriedly said. "Ruoyan," Yun replied. Yun Lan said in a low voice, "I didn't let you two keep in touch because I was afraid that you would ruin your future because you were too protective of your sister. I don't deny that Ruoyan has something to do with it." Worried that Yun Lan would vent his anger on Yun Ruoyan, Yun Moxiao hurriedly added, but I'm also thinking for myself. I grew up in the army and I'm unfamiliar with the capital, let alone the court. I know very well that the reason why I've always been so successful is because of the protection of my father and master. Yun Moxiao's tone was very sincere. Without the help of the two of you, I'm afraid that I wouldn't be able to move an inch in the officialdom. Therefore, I want to come back and learn more about the imperial city and the bureaucracy so as to lay the foundation for my future. Yun Moxiao's analysis was clear and logical, and Yun Lan approved of it in his heart. In fact, Yun Lan had been considering transferring Yun Moxiao back for the past few years. However, before he could figure out how to transfer him back, Yun Moxiao had acted first and reported later, catching Yun Lan off guard. You're quite thorough, Yun Lan said with an expressionless face. Yun Moxiao Guang couldn't tell what Yun Moxiao was thinking from his expression and tone, and his heart began to beat faster. As the future successor of the Yun family, your son bears the heavy responsibility of the entire family. When I do things, I will not only consider the present. I'd like to return to the capital to gain more experience and help you strengthen the family. Yun Moxiao bowed. Yun Moxiao's words truly struck a chord with Yun Lan's heart, and his cold face finally softened a little. Yun Lan looked at his brother and said, remember what you said today and always remember that the family's interests are more important than yours, more important than mine and more important than everyone else in the family. Everything else is insignificant in the face of the family's interests. Yun Moxiao didn't agree with Yun Lan's words. If a family couldn't protect its own members, then what was the point of keeping an empty shell for others to admire? But Yun Moxiao knew that this wasn't the time to express his opinion, so he sighed. I understand. Yun Moxiao stood in place waiting for Yun Lan's verdict. Since things have come to this and you have your own thoughts, let's leave it at that. Yun Lan sat back down behind his desk. Thank you, father, Yun Moxiao said, suppressing his excitement. I'll mediate the matter of you becoming an official, Yun Lan continued. Yun Lan said as he wrote something, but don't get your hopes up. I'm afraid it's not easy to become a garrison general. Everything has to be done one step at a time. I won't be greedy, Yun Moxiao replied. Yun Lan nodded but didn't say anything. Seeing that his father was focused on his writing, Yun Moxiao prepared to leave. You've been away from home for so long that you've forgotten most of the rules. Yun Lan glanced at his son. Disrespecting your elders is a violation of the 8th rule. According to the rules, you'll be punished to reflect for 3 days and 3 nights in the ancestral hall. However, Qianying's wedding is in 2 days, so you'll be punished to reflect for 2 days and 1 night and copy the rules 300 times. As Yun Lan spoke, he folded the letter and handed it to Yun Moxiao. This is a reply to your master. Give it to old Wu and have him deliver it. His father. Yun Moxiao accepted his punishment, accepted the letter and left the cottage happily. The next day when Yun Ruoyan found out that her father had been punished, she couldn't help but worry. There were guards outside the ancestral hall, preventing outsiders from entering, so Yun Ruoyan went to the Yun matriarch's cottage to find out more about the situation. Coincidentally, Madame and Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu were also there. Ruoyan greets grandmother. Yun Ruoyan walked over and bowed to her grandmother, then to Madame and there's no need to be so polite, Second Mississippi. Ever since Madame had colluded with a demonic cultivator to harm Yun Ruoyan during the Yun matriarch's birthday banquet, the two of them had completely fallen out, and they no longer addressed each other as mother and daughter. Apart from that, they appeared to be quite amicable on the surface, and Yun Lan and the Yun matriarch didn't interfere. Ruoyan, come sit by grandmother's side. The Yun matriarch beckoned to Yun Ruoyan, and Yun Ruoyan walked over and sat by her side. Ruoyan, it's been a while since you've been here. What have you been busy with? Yun Ruoyan leaned closer to the Yun matriarch and smiled. I've been busy cultivating these past few days, preparing for the trial I'll have after entering Kongming Academy. I haven't seen you in a while, grandmother. Do you miss me a lot? Yun Ruoyan's appetite had been improving recently, and her originally thin cheeks had become a little rounder. Her smile, accentuated by her peach blossom veil, made her look even more adorable. The Yun matriarch pinched Yun Ruoyan's cheeks and smiled. Look at you, drinking the phoenix stamen tea your manner sends over every day. It's hard not to miss you. Madame and An Yun Ruoyao were drinking the phoenix stamen tea that Xiaolan had brought over. The tea's originally fragrant flavor had been replaced by a bitter one. Both mother and daughter put down their teacups in unison. The other day Madame An wanted to go out with Sister Ruoyu, but the family's lightest carriage was used by Sister Ruoyan and Brother Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyao began. Yesterday I wanted to go out to buy some things for the trip to Kongming Academy, but the carriage still wasn't there. Sister Run, where have you been these past few days? Could you bring Ruoyu and me with you next time? Yun Ruoyan had said that she was cultivating in her cottage, but someone had said that she was always out and about, as if she wouldn't be satisfied until they found out what was going on. Yun Ruoyan, on the other hand, was the type of person who wouldn't let her be satisfied, and the worst outcome would be that no one would be happy. I went to grandfather's house. Yun Ruoyan knew that the Yun and Lins hadn't been on good terms because of what had happened to her mother, Lin Yueme. Suppressing herself in order to please others was something she would never do again. I told you before that grandfather found a pill to treat my birthmark. Although it's somewhat effective, it's not very obvious. Yun Ruoyan looked at Madame and Yun Ruoyao. After that, grandfather improved the pill and I've been going over to take it every day, but it's much more effective than before. When Madame and Yun Ruoyao heard this, they couldn't help but frown. Yun Ruoyan had indeed mentioned that Lin Zainan had treated her birthmark. However, Madame An believed that Yun Ruoyan was just putting on a show. In reality, the birthmark on Yun Ruoyan's face didn't show any signs of disappearing. But now that Yun Ruoyan was bringing it up again and in front of her grandmother at that, both Madame and Yun Ruoyao were surprised. Was she going to put on a show in front of her grandmother as well? Really? Madame An squeezed out a smile. Does this mean that the birthmark on second Mrs. face has gotten better? Sister Run, could you take off your veil for us to see? Yun Ruoyu, who had been the most active in the past but had recently been the most quiet, opened her eyes wide. That's right, Ruan. Please take off your veil and let grandmother have a look. The Yun matriarch's face was filled with genuine surprise. She liked this granddaughter of hers from the bottom of her heart, and her dislike of the birthmark on her face had turned into a pity. If Yun Ruoyan's birthmark could get better, it would be great news for the entire Yun family. Yun Ruoyan looked at the Yun matriarch's expectant gaze and nodded. Without hesitation she took off her veil, revealing the right side of her face that had always been hidden beneath it. As the Yun matriarch looked at Yun Ruoyan's right cheek, the wrinkles on her aged face slowly gathered together. Her voice trembled. It's getting better, it's really getting better. Chapter 168. It's really the spirit of the ancestors. There's hope for Ruoyan's face. The Yun matriarch reached out a withered hand to touch the birthmark on Yun Ruoyan's face. The birthmark's original red color had faded, and the area that had stretched from the corner of her eye to her right cheek and the back of her ear had truly shrunk. Madame and Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu all craned their necks to look. Yun Ruoyao covered her mouth. This sudden reality was hard for her to accept. Yun Ruoyu reached out slightly as if trying to touch the birthmark on Yun Ruoyan's face to confirm that she wasn't seeing an illusion. On the other hand, Madame Anne's face was pale, her hand clutching her chest. Grandmother. Yun Ruoyan grabbed the Yun matriarch's hand. All these years, grandfather has never given up on treating my birthmark. After so many years of research and experimentation, he's finally managed to concoct a pill that can cure my birthmark. Yun Ruoyan recalled Lin Zainan's sudden death in her past life, as well as the destruction of the Yun and Lin families. She couldn't help but tear up. I know that there's been a rift between the Yun and Lin families because of what happened to my mother, but both your families are my family. I don't want to lose either of you. Good girl, good girl. The Yun matriarch patted the back of Yun Ruoyan's hand. If grandfather can really cure your face, he'll be the benefactor of the Yun family. I'll definitely pay him a visit personally to thank him. As long as he's willing to let go of everything that happened in the past, the Yun family won't hold on to it any longer. After hearing the Yun matriarch's words, Yun Ruo suddenly had the urge to wash off the fake birthmark on her face. However, she couldn't act on it. Perhaps it was because she'd been too stifled in her past life, but in this life, Yun Ruoyan was often a little impulsive. For example, she hadn't planned on what had happened today at all. It was just that she had run into someone who wanted to make her unhappy, and she had slacked off in the morning to make the fake birthmark on her face smaller and lighter. As a result, she suddenly had the urge to slap those people in the face who wanted to make her unhappy. However, Yun Ruoyan wasn't an impulsive person. Revealing her true appearance was a big deal and she wouldn't do anything rash. Ruoyan, congratulations. Yun Ruoyu spoke up. Yun Ruoyan didn't know if she was imagining things, but she could hear a hint of sincerity in her voice. Thank you, Ruoyu. Yun Ruoyan smiled. Madame and Yun Ruoyao had no choice but to accept the fact that Yun Ruoyan's birthmark would be completely healed. In their mixed emotions, they reluctantly congratulated her, and Yun Ruoyan smiled and thanked them. Your father Yun Lan doesn't know about this, right? Mrs. Yun asked. I don't know. Only my brother knows. You two children, how can you hide such a big thing from the adults? Mrs. Lu rebuked. Yun Ruoyan lowered her head, looking like a child who had made a mistake. Because the previous treatment failed and this time I've only just started to get better. Grandfather doesn't dare to guarantee to what extent I can recover, and I'm afraid that it'll all be for naught, so I didn't dare to disturb you and father. Yun Ruoyan's pitiful words made the Yun matriarch's heart ache for her. She suddenly felt an urge to make up for what she had done, so she asked Yun Ruoyan, "Did you mention what herbs you need? As long as the Lin family has them, we'll provide them to you." Yun Ruoyan's eyes lit up. Grandfather said that this pill does require some very precious herbs, some of which are extremely rare. He's still trying to find a way to procure them. What herbs? The Yun matriarch asked. He didn't say, the Yun matriarch replied. Go ask him tomorrow. There's nothing in the capital that the Yun and Lin families can't procure together. Yun Ruoyan nodded. Last night, when she and Xiaoqiu had been researching the new pill, they'd been lacking quite a few precious herbs. For the moment, Yun Ruoyan didn't dare to ask for too much. Instead, she planned to discuss with Xiaoqiu and come up with a list of herbs that she could use as an excuse to ask her grandmother for more. Yun Ruoyan felt that she really was a genius. Oh, right. As if suddenly remembering something, the Yun matriarch turned to Madame and, didn't you say that the suits for everyone were ready? Have someone bring them over now so that everyone can wear them as a feast for Madame Anne's eyes. Madame Anne hadn't expected the Yun matriarch to suddenly think of something like this. She paused for a moment before instructing one of her maids to fetch the clothes. Yun Ruoyan took this opportunity to ask the Yun matriarch about Yun Mo Xiao. The Yun matriarch had heard about this matter from Xiao Lan early in the morning. She naturally felt sorry for her grandson, so she sent someone to call Yun Lan over to ask about this matter. Yun Lan then told the Yun matriarch about how Yun Mo Xiao had acted first and reported later. Xiao didn't think things through, so it's not a bad thing for your father to punish him. She turned to Yun Ruoyan. Did your brother tell you that he wasn't going back to the barracks? Yun Ruoyan lowered her head, still looking like a child who had done something wrong. My brother did say that he didn't want to return to the barracks, but it was just a casual remark. I didn't expect that he'd actually decide not to return. Yun Ruoyan lowered her head, her bangs covering her calm eyes. However, her tone gave off the impression that she was trying very hard to suppress her joy. The Yun matriarch thought to herself, Yun Ruoyan has finally found someone she can rely on after being alone for so many years. What a pitiful pair of siblings. Not long after, Hong Yu and a few of her maids returned with the newly made formal dresses. Ruoyan, this is yours. The Yun matriarch pointed at a lake green, full-sleeved, pleated dress. In the past, Yun Ruoyan's formal dresses had either been bought by Peony or made by the Yun matriarch. This time, Madame Anne had volunteered to take care of everyone's formal dresses, and the Yun matriarch had left it to her. However, the color and style of the dress were all made according to the Yun matriarch's specifications. Naturally, the Yun matriarch was extremely meticulous about how the Yun family's wife-born daughter would dress when she went out. Yun Ruoyan could tell that the dress, from the color to the material, was of excellent quality, but wasn't the waist a little too slender? Sure enough, everyone had put on their formal dresses except Yun Ruoyan's, which was stuck right at her waist. What are we going to do? Madame Anne exclaimed exaggeratedly. How could it be too small? I told you to make it according to mother's measurements. Second miss, have you gotten fatter recently? Yun Ruoyan's appetite had been very good recently, and she was developing both horizontally and vertically. She had already progressed from a skinny girl to a muscular one. However, the last time the Yun matriarch had asked her to take her measurements, her waist hadn't been so slender. If it had been 3 months ago, she would have been able to put on the dress after starving for a meal. Now, however, Yun Ruoyan probably wouldn't be able to put it on even if she starved for an entire day. Yun Ruoyan sneered inwardly. The Yun matriarch was using such a low-level trick to tease her again. Was it really an illness that needed to be cured? Second, madam. Yun Ruoyan pointed at the dress. It's a good thing that grandmother thought to take it out and try it on today. If there were any problems with it, we could still change it. Wouldn't it have been terrible if we'd only discovered it 2 days later? The Yun matriarch's expression didn't look too good either. She had spent so much effort to come up with a new style that Xiaolon had drawn for her, but the resulting dress couldn't be worn. If she changed it any further, it would surely ruin the overall beauty of the dress. Daughter-in-law, what's wrong with you? Why don't you think about what you're doing? Look at your waist, it's as thin as a gourd. Can you even wear it? Madame An lowered her head and suddenly turned to Hong Yu. Didn't I tell you to keep an eye on the clothing workshop? How could there be such a problem? Hong Yu stared blankly for a moment before quickly recovering. She knelt on the ground and apologized profusely. I haven't been feeling well these past few days, so I haven't been to the workshop. Please forgive me, madam. Whenever there was a problem, the blame would always be placed on the servants. In her previous life, Yun Ruoyan hadn't been able to see through this, but now she couldn't be any clearer. However, this Hong Yu wasn't someone to be trifled with, and it would be quite interesting to take care of her. Grandmother. Yun Ruoyan turned to the Yun matriarch. Since it's already come to this, there's no point in punishing her. Ruoyan is a benevolent child, so you can do as you please. The Yun matriarch glanced at Madame N, her eyes full of disappointment, as if telling her that, as the matriarch of the household, she wasn't even as good as a child. Madame N looked at the handkerchief in her hands. What's wrong with me today? Why is everything going so wrong? No, as long as she was around Yun Ruoyan, everything would go wrong for her. Yun Ruoyan was truly her nemesis. Thank you, Second Mississippi. Hong Yu stood up and bowed to Yun Ruoyan, but her voice was still as arrogant as ever. As the matriarch's personal servant, Hong Yu's arrogance towards those of a lower status had probably been carved into her bones. It turned out that, in Hong Yu's eyes, Yun Ruoyan was an existence that was even lower than herself. Sister Hong Yu, Yun Ruoyan smiled at Hong Yu. Are you feeling well today? Second young mistress, Hong Yu is not feeling unwell today, Hong Yu replied. In that case, I'll have to trouble you to personally keep an eye on the workshop's workers. I want to see the finished clothes in the afternoon, Yun Ruoyan instructed the Yun matriarch. Yes, I'll go right away. Hong Yu immediately took the clothes and left. Madame and Yun Ruoyan chatted with the Yun matriarch until the end of lunch. In the evening, Hong Yu delivered the repaired clothes to Yun Ruoyan's rooms. Second miss, it's done. Hong Yu handed the clothes to Yun Ruoyan, and Xilan placed them in front of Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan casually flipped through the clothes. This isn't working. Why not? Hong Yu asked. She knew a thing or two about needlework, and she had personally seen the workers working on the clothes, so there was no way there would be a problem. There's a crease on the waist, Yun Ruoyan said, trying to nitpick. Redo it. This dress, for example, had been made so small at the waist that Madame N would never make such a rudimentary mistake. It was true that when the old ghost was in the wind, the little ghost would dare to make trouble. If she didn't take advantage of this opportunity to suppress Hong Yu, Peony and Xilan might not be able to defeat her once she left. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but add some pressure to her gaze. I wouldn't dare. Hong Yu's knees buckled and she knelt down. It's best that you don't dare. Yun Ruoyan turned her gaze away from Hong Yu and turned to Xilan. Xilan, I'll leave this matter to you and Peony. Tonight, Hong Yu will deliver the altered dress to you and Peony for inspection. Make sure to inspect it carefully and correct it if there's even the slightest bit of dissatisfaction. Yes, Xilan understands. The next day, Peony came to help Yun Ruoyan wash up and change. Seeing that she wasn't in good spirits, Yun Ruoyan asked her what was the matter. Peony smiled and told Yun Ruoyan that Hong Yu had delivered the dress last night, but Xilan had told her that the neckline was too big and that Xilan should take it back to alter it. Hong Yu looked as if she was about to explode, but in the end she swallowed her anger. In the middle of the night, Hong Yu knocked on her door to deliver the dress. Xilan pretended to be asleep and refused to get up, so Peony had no choice but to open the door and deal with Hong Yu. Did the alterations pass? Yun Ruoyan asked casually. I made the neckline bigger again, so I told her to take it back and alter it again. She'll be back in 4 hours and it should be here by now. Peony smiled faintly. Unlike Xilan, who was only trying to vent her anger, Peony understood Yun Ruoyan's intentions, and naturally wouldn't let Hongyu off the hook so easily. Last night, when Peony had told the red-eyed Hongyu that the neckline had been enlarged again, Yun Ruoyan could clearly see the veins on Hongyu's temples bulging. Seeing that Hongyu was about to explode, Peony only said coolly, "Why don't you wake the mistress up and give it a try?" Hongyu immediately deflated, and Peony couldn't help but laugh when she thought of that scene. "If you can't, take it back and redo it." Just then Xilan's loud voice came from outside the courtyard. Why do I have to redo it again?" Hongyu's slightly hoarse voice followed. "You're asking why?" Xilan seemed very angry. "I told you to make the neckline bigger, so why did you make it smaller instead? Don't you understand what I'm saying?" "But last night, Peony clearly told me to make it smaller if the neckline was too big," Hongyu argued. "I don't care. In any case, it looks small to me," Xilan said. "Why don't we call the mistress out and give it a try?" Yun Ruoyan and Peony couldn't help but laugh when they heard this. Mississippi, as Peony combed Yun Ruoyan's hair, she asked, "Are you afraid that this dress won't be wearable in the end?" Tomorrow was the day after the Crown Prince and Yi Qianying's wedding, and everyone in the Yun family would have to attend Yi Qianying's wedding. Yun Ruoyan's dress might not be wearable in the end, and Peony was still a little worried. "I didn't plan on wearing this dress in the first place," Yun Ruoyan replied. If she had planned on wearing it, she wouldn't have allowed Xilan to do so. "Tomorrow, just choose one of the dresses you've worn before." Tomorrow was Yi Qianying's wedding, and Yun Ruoyan only intended to show her face before finding a place to hide. She didn't want to be too flashy and eye-catching. "Peony, prepare some food for me. I'm going to the ancestral hall." Yun Ruoyan had already received the Yun matriarch's permission the day before, so she could visit her father today. Yun Ruoyan carried the food that Peony had prepared all the way to the ancestral hall. Just as she was about to reach the entrance, she saw Yun Ruoyu. Yun Ruoyu was walking out of the ancestral hall, also holding a food box in her hands. She also saw Yun Ruoyan and stood there as if waiting for her. Yun Ruoyan didn't know what she was up to, and she frowned as she walked over. "Sister Ruoyan." Before Yun Ruoyan could ask, Yun Ruoyu greeted her politely, a rare smile on her face. "Ruoyu." Although Yun Ruoyan didn't know what Yun Ruoyu was up to, she didn't want to lose her temper for no reason. "What are you doing here so early in the morning?" Yun Ruoyan waved the food box in her hands and smiled. "My mother knew that brother was being punished, so she made some food for me to bring over." "So it was Madame Qin Jianmei." Yun Ruoyan nodded. "How's Madame Qin doing?" "My mother's still the same, praying to Buddha every day, and she's in good spirits," Yun Ruoyu replied. "I've been following my mother around the cottage, eating vegetarian food and praying to Buddha, and my mental state is much better than before." When Yun Ruoyan saw Yun Ruoyan's smile and gentle tone, she couldn't help but fall into a daze. "Sister Ruoyan, I didn't know any better and followed Madame Qin and Sister Ruoyan to hurt you. Now that I think about it, I'm so sorry." Yun Ruoyu held the food box with both hands and said uneasily, "My mother has been encouraging me to apologize to you in person. She said that you'd be magnanimous enough to forgive me." "Sister Ruoyan, will you forgive me?" Yun Ruoyu raised her head and looked at Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan felt even more dazed. The person in front of her didn't seem like Yun Ruoyu at all. It was said that a leopard couldn't change its spots. Would someone as stubborn and narrow-minded as Yun Ruoyu really change? "Sister Ruoyan, I know you won't forgive me so easily, but that's all right. My mother said that sincerity will always work," Yun Ruoyu replied. "I'll use my actions to prove that I'm different from before." As Yun Ruoyan listened to Yun Ruoyu's words, her gaze inadvertently landed on her neck. Although Yun Ruoyu was wearing a turtleneck shirt, she could still faintly see the scar on her neck. Perhaps she wouldn't be able to wear anything that exposed her neck in the future. "It'd be a good thing if you could think that way," Yun Ruoyan replied coolly. She wasn't someone who easily trusted others, but what did it matter whether she trusted them or not? In Yun Ruoyan's eyes, Yun Ruoyu had always been Madame and Yun Ruoyao's scapegoat. If she didn't understand the situation and continued to cause trouble, Yun Ruoyan naturally wouldn't forgive her. If she could see the truth, Yun Ruoyan wouldn't be bothered to pursue the matter, but Yun Ruoyan wouldn't be close to her either. Please thank Madame Qin for her concern and send my regards to her as well. My brother and I will visit her when we have time, Yun Ruoyan said politely. No need, Yun Ruoyu hurriedly said. My mother prefers peace and quiet, so I won't trouble you too. Yun Ruoyan had only been polite, but when Yun Ruoyu put it that way she didn't insist. As she watched Yun Ruoyu's departing figure, Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but frown. Had she really changed for the better? Why did she feel that things weren't so simple? Ruoyan, why don't you come in? Yun Maxiao's voice came from within the ancestral hall. Yun Ruoyan walked forward. The servant by the door was still holding on to the lock, but when he saw Yun Ruoyan approach he held on to it. Second miss, the old madam has already instructed you to enter. Please enter, the servant told Yun Ruoyan. In that case, whose permission did you receive to enter the ancestral hall? Yun Ruoyan asked casually. Miss Yun, you didn't enter the ancestral hall. I was the one who brought the food in and you left after receiving the empty containers. Yun Ruoyan nodded and walked into the ancestral hall. As soon as Yun Ruoyan walked in, she saw Yun Maxiao kneeling on a mat in the middle of the room. When Yun Maxiao saw Yun Ruoyan he called out, Ruoyan, come and eat with brother. Yun Maxiao was about to start eating when Yun Ruoyan suddenly thought of something and hurriedly stopped him. Brother, don't eat. Chapter 170. What's the matter? Yun Maxiao had already picked up a mouthful of food when he heard Yun Ruoyan's voice. He couldn't help but stop and look at Yun Ruoyao suspiciously. Yun Ruoyan quickly walked over. Without a word, she put down the food box in her hands, plucked out a small silver hairpin from her hair, and began testing the dishes one by one. Although Yun Ruoyan didn't say anything, her actions spoke volumes. Yun Maxiao put down his chopsticks and looked at Yun Ruoyan's actions. His expression turned serious, but he didn't make a sound. In front of Yun Maxiao were 3 dishes, a bowl of soup, a pot of wine, and a large bowl of rice. Yun Ruoyan tested every single dish with a silver needle, and only after confirming that there was no poison did she heave a sigh of relief. Everything's fine now. Yun Ruoyan inserted the silver hairpin back into her hair. You can eat now. Yun Maxiao's mood had become a little heavy. Yun Ruoyan's proficiency in testing poisons was enough to show just how treacherous her life had been. Yun Ruoyan felt her brother's gaze and smiled. There's nothing wrong with being a little more careful, right? Now that everything's fine, let's eat or the food's going to get cold. Yun Ruoyan brought out the dishes that she had brought. Yun Ruoyu had only brought vegetarian dishes while Yun Ruoyan had brought meat dishes. This combination made for a sumptuous meal. Madame Qin wouldn't poison us, would she? Yun Maxiao picked up his chopsticks and picked up a piece of meat. I'm not suspecting Madame Qin. Yun Ruoyan took a small bite of the cabbage. It was light and refreshing, and the kitchen maids at home really couldn't make something as delicious as this. As Yun Ruoyan ate, she continued, it's just that Yun Ruoyu isn't normal. She grew up with Madame Qin and she's helped them harm me quite a bit. Yun Ruoyan put down her chopsticks and told her brother about her suspicions about Yun Ruoyu. Although Yun Maxiao had a straightforward personality, he was just as cautious as Yun Ruoyan. Your suspicions aren't unreasonable and you should be more careful, Yun Maxiao continued. But after mother passed away, Madame Qin took care of both of us. You were too young to remember, but I'll definitely find an opportunity to repay her kindness. I understand, brother, Yun Ruoyan replied. If Ruoyu truly repents, I won't blame her for what happened in the past. After dinner, Yun Ruoyan packed up her belongings and left, while Yun Maxiao continued his seclusion in the ancestral hall. This little interlude was quickly forgotten by the siblings. Soon it was the day of Yi Qianying's wedding. The late green dress had already been changed 7 or 8 times. When Xilan finally nodded and said it was fine, Hongyu was on the verge of tears. Hongyu hadn't had a good night's sleep for the past 2 days. She had been busy rushing between Tinglan Yuan and the clothing workshop. When she arrived at the workshop, she had to keep an eye on the workers, and when she arrived at Tinglan Yuan, she had to keep an eye on Xilan's mood. The owner of the clothing shop was also furious. How could there be such a way to modify clothes? This was clearly looking for trouble. Hongyu had no choice but to increase the repair fee. Hongyu couldn't get through to Xilan, and she didn't dare to provoke Yun Ruoyan, so she went to Madame N to complain. As soon as Madame N heard Hongyu's words, she knew that Yun Ruoyan was trying to intimidate her. She was already angry to begin with, and this incident only made her even angrier. I only told you to tamper with the dress. Who told you to make the waist so small? Madame N recalled the Yun matriarch's lukewarm comment about how she could wear the dress. She wanted to slap Hong Yu across the face. Madam, you were the one who said that as long as that slut couldn't wear the dress, I could do whatever I wanted. Hong Yu felt extremely aggrieved. How dare you talk back to me? Madame N suddenly stood up from her chair, her eyes wide. Yun Ruoyan didn't care about her at all, and now even her own servant dared to talk back to her. Mother! Yun Ruoyao saw that Madame N was angry and hurriedly tried to calm her down. Hong Yu has misspoken, so don't hold it against her. Hong Yu, you may leave. Yun Ruoyao gestured to Hong Yu. Do as you see fit. Don't bother Madame, and Hong Yu left Madame Anne's cottage in despair. No one would be able to pay for the repair, so she would have to pay for it herself. Cough, cough, cough. Madame Anne coughed uncontrollably. Mother, what's the matter? Yun Ruoyu walked in from outside and asked with concern when she saw Madame Anne's state. Sister Ruoyu, how did you find the time to visit Mother today? Yun Ruoyao asked as she tried to soothe Madame Anne's anger. Sister, please don't blame me. Yun Ruoyu didn't mind Yun Ruoyao's attitude. I've been spending the past few days at my mother's place, eating vegetarian and praying to the Buddha. I've been feeling quite uneasy lately. My mother heard from me that Mother wasn't feeling well recently, so she specifically asked me to come and take a look. Yun Ruoyao wanted to continue mocking her, but Madame N suppressed her coughing and shot her a look, signaling for her to keep quiet. Madame N smiled at Yun Ruoyu. Your mother is very considerate, cough, cough. As soon as Madame N finished speaking, she began coughing again. Mother, why are you coughing so badly? Yun Ruoyu seemed to have suddenly thought of something. Why don't you have my mother concoct some cough medicine for you? My mother's quite skilled at concocting medicines, and she was the one who cured my injuries. Madame N coughed so much that she couldn't even breathe properly, and her face was bright red. All right, I'll have your mother concoct some medicine for you. Yes, Mother, I'll go look for my mother right away. Yun Ruoyu hurriedly left. Throughout Madame Anne's courtyard, a series of heart-wrenching coughs could be heard. In Yun Ruoyan's cottage, Hong Yu followed Xilan into Yun Ruoyan's room. Miss, the dress is ready. Please try it on. Xilan handed Yun Ruoyan the dress. Yes, I'll try it on. Yun Ruoyan lazily stood up from the couch. Peony took the dress from Xilan's hands and helped Yun Ruoyan try it on. Hong Yu stood by the side, clenching her fists nervously. In the past, she had never felt so nervous in front of anyone other than Madame N. First of all, she was Madame Anne's personal maid, and because she had the right to speak to Madame N, everyone would try to curry favor with her. Second of all, she had always believed that as long as she didn't offend the old master or Madame N would be able to protect her even if she caused trouble. It was these two reasons that had led to Hong Yu's domineering personality. Now that the latter reason had been shattered, Hong Yu knew that no matter what punishment she received in her cottage, her mistress wouldn't be able to protect her. As a result, she began to restrain herself. Yun Ruoyan suddenly cried out, causing Hong Yu's heart to clench. What's the matter, miss? Are you feeling unwell? Before Hong Yu could open her mouth, Peony and Xilan asked at the same time. Everywhere, Yun Ruoyan replied with a frown. Everywhere. How could that be? Xilan had agreed to this. Hong Yu protested in her heart, but she didn't dare speak up. She would be talking back if she did. Hong Yu looked anxiously at Xilan, her eyes pleading with her. With no one to rely on, she could only rely on Xilan as a life-saving straw. Miss, there's really no need to change this. Xilan didn't know what Yun Ruoyan's intentions were, so she spoke the truth. If there's no need to change it, then there's no need to change it, Peony continued. We won't be wearing this dress either. Xilan took the dress from Peony's hands, hesitated for a moment, then turned around and shoved it back into Hong Yu's hands. There's no need to change it. Take it with you. Hong Yu hadn't expected such a situation to occur. She was both angry and anxious, and her entire body trembled as she clutched the dress. Why aren't you leaving yet? Do you want to eat breakfast here? Xilan looked at her coldly. Hong Yu clutched the dress in her hands and turned to walk out of the cottage. Once outside, she took a deep breath, suddenly felt her throat go numb and began coughing uncontrollably. Hong Yu covered her mouth and coughed as she walked out of her cottage. Miss, you have to leave for the Manor at noon. What will you do without formal attire? Xilan asked. Who says you don't have any formal attire? Didn't you buy a lot of them before? As Peony spoke, she went to the wardrobe in the inner room and pulled out all of the suits she'd bought earlier. Peony and Xilan helped Yun Ruian change. I've really gained weight. I can't even wear this red dress. Yun Ruian sighed. Yun Ruian remembered that this red dress had been made for her by the Yun matriarch when the crown prince had visited the Yun manor. At the time it had been perfect for her, but now she couldn't put it on. Miss, you've only grown up, not gained weight. Peony smiled. Yes, miss, you look better like this. You used to have a sharp chin, but now, although your cheeks are a little rounder than before, they're still pink and tender. How festive. Xilan's words made Peony frown, but Yun Ruian smiled. After trying on all of the dresses, Yun Ruian finally chose a light purple dress embroidered with multicolored flower petals. The collar and sleeves of the dress were embroidered with gold and silver thread, with a large number of small butterflies. Miss, why haven't I seen this dress before? Xilan looked at Yun Ruian, who had already changed. Weren't you the ones who bought this? Yun Ruian asked. Yun Ruian remembered that she had found this dress in an empty courtyard in the palace after she had cured herself of the aphrodisiac. At the time she had put it on in case of an emergency. When did old madam make such beautiful clothes for Miss? We didn't even know about it, Xilan said. Yun Ruian smiled but didn't explain. Peony seemed to remember that the dress hadn't been made by the old madam, but rather that Yun Ruian had worn it from outside. However, since Yun Ruian didn't mention it, she didn't ask. As soon as Yun Ruian finished dressing, Yun Moxiao arrived at her cottage. He was dressed in a purple robe with a white jade tiara and belt. He was tall, handsome, and wore a smile that shone brighter than the sun. When he walked into Yun Moxiao's rooms, all of the maids, with the exception of Peony, blushed as they stared at him, forgetting what they were doing. Xilan, the tea's about to overflow. Xilan was pouring tea for Yun Ruian when she froze when Yun Moxiao walked in. Peony snatched the teapot from her hands to prevent the table from overflowing. I'll prepare some snacks for Miss and young master. Xilan ran out, blushing. Yun Ruian watched as her figure disappeared through the door, then looked at Peony. These two girls weren't young anymore. Peony in particular was about to find a husband. Chapter 171. At noon, a servant came to inform them that the carriage was already waiting at the gates, and that Yun Ruian and Yun Moxiao should hurry out. Yun Ruian and Yun Moxiao left the manor together. In the corridor leading to the manor's main entrance, the two of them bumped into the Yun matriarch. From afar, the Yun matriarch could tell that Yun Ruian's dress wasn't the lake green, pleated dress she had been wearing. When Yun Ruian arrived in front of her, the Yun matriarch asked, Ruian, where did you get this dress from? This is the first time I've seen you wear it. Yes, grandmother. This dress was made for me by the slaughtering king. It just so happened that there were some problems with the original dress, and even after I changed it, it still wasn't very comfortable, so I decided to wear it. Yun Ruian had discovered a new use for Li Mo, as a shield. Whenever there was something she couldn't explain or didn't want to explain, she would blame it all on Li Mo. Yun Ruian wasn't afraid that anyone would ask her about it. In fact, no one would dare to do so given Li Mo's status. Pei Zio, for example, had no choice but to swallow his anger when he thought that Li Mo was the one who'd taught him a lesson. Yun Lan had long since informed the Yun matriarch of the slaughtering king's verbal engagement, and when she heard that Yun Ruian's dress was the slaughtering king's handiwork, she was naturally elated. Your Highness, you truly have a good eye. This dress combines the characteristics of both palace and common folk attire, making it both dignified and elegant, the Yun matriarch exclaimed. I had a friend in the palace who loved embroidering these butterflies on her sleeves, and I'm sure the slaughtering king learned from her. Yun Shi said as she looked at Yun Moxiao, who was walking on the other side of her. She saw his tall and dignified appearance. The Yun matriarch couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Although Lin Yueme was no longer around, she had left behind a pair of outstanding descendants for the Yun family. Yun Ruian and Yun Moxiao helped the Yun matriarch onto the carriage, but Madame An still didn't come out. The Yun matriarch was a little displeased. Just as she was about to have Xiaolon call her, Madame An walked out, supported by Yun Ruiyao and Yun Ruiyu. Mother, I'm late. Madam, and apologized to the Yun matriarch's carriage supported by Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu. Xiaolon lifted the curtain, and the Yun matriarch saw Madame Anne's pale face through the window. She couldn't bring herself to reprimand her. "Why are you so sick?" Mrs. Liu asked. "Did you see a doctor?" "Yes," Madame Anne replied. "The physician said that it's just a cold and he'll be fine after some rest. I have my own body and I need to know how to cherish it. Qianying has always been close to you, so you have to show your face. After Qianying leaves, if you're not feeling well, come back early." The Yun matriarch gestured for Xiaolon to lower the curtains. Scope. Naturally, Yun Ruoyan and Yun Maxiao sat in the smallest carriage, while Madame and Yun Ruoyan and Yun Maxiao sat in the larger carriage in the middle. Yun Lan had left for court early in the morning, and he would head directly to the Crown Prince's manor to celebrate the wedding, rather than to the Yi Manor. 2 hours later they arrived at the Yi Manor, which was located on the southern side of the capital. The Yi Manor was also bustling with activity. After all, the Crown Prince was marrying a concubine, which was quite a big deal in the capital. The Yun matriarch sat in a sedan chair, escorted by the matriarch of the Yi family to the main hall. Although the Yi family was no longer as famous as the Yun Manor, it had once been a large family with some history. From the outside, the Yi Manor wasn't any worse than the Yun Manors, but the gap between the two families was clear. The Yun Manor's corridors were all made of top-quality mahogany, and the servants regularly maintained them to prevent corrosion and dampness. Even after 100 years they still looked as good as new. The Yi Manor's wooden corridors and railings were mostly damaged, and the color of the mahogany had darkened. The exotic flowers and plants in the Yun family's garden would never wither all year round. It was not even autumn yet, but the Yi family's garden was already yellow and withered. Compared to the Yun Manor's clear, bottomless waters, the Yi Manor's gardens were a murky yellow, and there wasn't a single fish to be seen. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but think of Li Mo's Slaughtering King's Manor. Although the Slaughtering King's Manor gave her the impression that it was a messy mess, it was actually full of flowers and life. In particular, the pond of lotus flowers outside the small living room was filled with lotus pods. The fragrance was so fragrant that it was unforgettable. Even though the Lins didn't have a large family, they still spent quite a bit of money on the maintenance of their gardens. Lin Zainan's Immortal Garden, Lin Qingxian's Bamboo Garden, Lin Qingshua's Peach Garden, and even the Zhou siblings' temporary residence were all elegant and unique. No matter how large a family's legacy was, if it wasn't managed properly, it would eventually decline. The Yi Manor was already showing signs of decline. By the time they arrived at the main hall, there were already quite a few guests present. The current patriarch of the Yi family, who was also Yi Qianying's second uncle, was an official in the imperial city. As a result, most of the guests present were from mid-level clans. Few of them were from prominent clans, because they had all gone to the Crown Prince's residence. As soon as the Yun matriarch entered the hall, everyone stood up in unison and rushed to greet her. Their gazes lingered on Yun Ruoyan, Yun Ruoyao, Yun Ruoyu and Yun Maxiao. After all, none of the Yun family's heirs had been betrothed. How many of the middle-sized families wouldn't want to be related to the Yun family? But that was just wishful thinking. How could a small family like theirs possibly hope to get close to the Yun family? Just then Yun Ruoyan noticed a familiar figure in the crowd. Pei Zio. Pei Zio had clearly seen her as well. He looked at Yun Ruoyan with a complicated gaze, but when Yun Ruoyan noticed him he immediately averted his gaze. Yun Ruoyan was secretly pleased. Although she hadn't been able to get rid of Pei Zio in one fell swoop, at least he wouldn't pounce on her as soon as he saw her. Although she hadn't physically harmed him, the psychological blow would likely take some time to recover. Not long after the Yun matriarch and the others took their seats, the head of the Yi family, Yi Mingjing, rushed in from outside to greet the Yun matriarch and Madam, and these must be my nephew and nieces. Yi Mingjing looked at Yun Ruoyan's group, then his gaze landed on Yun Maxiao. You're already so big. Back then when brother and I went to the Yun Manor to fetch our bride, I even saw you. You were only this big back then in your mother's arms. Because he was so excited, Yi Mingjing's chubby face was flushed unnaturally, and his mustache was also sticking out. When he spoke to the Yun matriarch he would bow his back and lower his eyes, but when he turned to speak to others he would immediately puff out his belly as if he were on a pedestal. Even Yun Maxiao was acting like an elder to him. Yun Maxiao had no choice but to politely stand up and exchange a few words with him. When Yun Ruoyan saw that Yi Mingjing was looking at her again, she immediately averted her gaze. Although Yun Ruoyan had lived 2 lives, everyone she had come into contact with, be they good or bad, had an extraordinary aura about them. Although Yi Mingjing looked amiable, his eyes and actions revealed a sense of pettiness that Yun Ruoyan didn't like. At this point, Yun Ruoyan still didn't understand that everyone had their own way of interacting with one another. She was only acting according to her heart's desires, causing Yi Mingjing to feel awkward. Yi Mingjing rubbed his nose as if he didn't mind. Qianying's preparing in the backyard. Why don't you go see her? Uncle Yi, we've been wanting to see Sister Qianying for a long time, Yun Ruoyu replied obediently. It's just that there's no one to guide us and it's our first time visiting your home. I've been careless, Yi Mingjing laughed. I'll have someone take you there right away. Logically speaking, Madame N should have gone as well, but she really wasn't in the mood to do so. She'd already given Yi Mingjing her dowry, so she didn't tag along. Although Yun Ruoyan didn't want to go, she still had to keep up appearances. Under the guidance of a servant, Yun Ruoyu, and Yun Ruoyao all the way to Yi Qianying's bridal quarters. Yi Qianying had already put on her phoenix coronet and red cape. She sat on the red wedding bed like a meticulously carved puppet, not giving off the slightest sense of joy. When she heard that someone had arrived, Yi Qianying lifted her veil and sat on the bed with Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu, half joking about their relationship. Yun Ruoyan casually sat down on a stool by the side. Sister Ruoyu, please excuse us for a moment. I'd like to speak to Sister Ruoyan in private, Yi Qianying suddenly said. Neither Yun Ruoyu nor Yun Ruoyao expected Yi Qianying to make such a request. They glanced at each other, then at Yun Ruoyan before standing up and walking out. Yun Ruoyan looked at the exquisitely dressed Yi Qianying, looking forward to what Yi Qianying would say to her. Yi Qianying stood up from the bed and sat down on the stool by Yun Ruoyan's side. She looked at Yun Ruoyan very seriously. There's no one else here and I'd like to ask you something. I hope you'll tell me the truth and not try to deceive me. Yun Ruoyan looked at Yi Qianying strangely. Why don't you tell me? I'd also like to know what I have to hide from you. Did you frame Brother Zhou at the Yichuan brothel? Yi Qianying asked. No, Yun Ruoyan replied without even thinking. Nonsense. Yi Qianying's tone suddenly turned serious. That morning I clearly saw you outside the Yichuan brothel. Yi Qianying didn't know that Yun Ruoyan had seen her as well. Oh! Yun Ruoyan exclaimed in surprise. You saw me? Which eye of yours saw me? Yi Qianying suppressed her anger. I saw you with both my eyes. Not only did you go to the Yichuan brothel, you were dressed as a man, and I even saw you save Huahua who had fallen from the brothel. Chapter 172. Then let me ask you, where did you see it with your own eyes? Yun Ruoyan continued to ask shamelessly. Yi Qianying's chest heaved. I saw you at the gates of the Yichuan brothel. Why would you appear at the gates of the Yichuan brothel? I followed you there, Yi Qianying replied. That morning I was on my way to the Yi Manor when I saw you walking alone on the streets, acting suspiciously, so I followed you all the way to the Yichuan brothel. Yi Qianying looked at Yun Ruoyan as if to say, are you speechless? How laughable. Yun Ruoyan smiled coldly. These past few days I've always been with my brother and I've never left the house by myself. Both my servants and my coachman can attest to that. If you want to frame me, at least come up with a better plan. What do you mean by that? Frame me? Yi Qianying frowned. What do you mean by framing? Yun Ruoyan sneered. You were the one who framed Pei Zhou, and now you're trying to frame me. It was you. You're the one who framed Brother Zhou. You're the one who framed me. Yi Qianying suddenly stood up from her chair, exasperated. What's wrong? Did I hit the nail on the head? Yun Ruoyan also stood up. She was a head taller than Yi Qianying and her aura was overwhelming. You and Pei Zhou were originally in love with each other. At first he was very protective of you, but as time went on he began to treat you coldly. You held a grudge against him, so you tried to use that aphrodisiac to make love to him at the flower viewing party, but you ended up with the crown prince instead. Yun Ruoyan released her aura as she approached Yi Qianying step by step. Xianxia was forced to take a few steps back. She opened her mouth to retort, but Yun Ruoyan didn't give her a chance. Not only was Pei Zhou unwilling to take the blame for you, he even found evidence that you were in cahoots with the crown prince. It was only because of him that the crown prince had no choice but to marry you. Yun Ruoyan's every word was like a hand mercilessly tearing open the scars in Xianxia's heart, then mercilessly sprinkling salt on them. You like Pei Zhou and want to marry him, but he thinks you're dirty. You hated him, so you thought of a way to dirty him. You're lying. I didn't. Xianxia screamed. It was you, it was you. You framed Brother Zhou, you dirted him. Xianxia had expected Yun Ruoyan to deny it, but she hadn't expected Yun Ruoyan to shift the blame onto her. What she hadn't expected even more was that Yun Ruoyan could make a lie sound truer than the truth. Me. Yun Ruoyan glared at Xianxia. Why would I do that? What grudge do I have with Pei Zhou that requires me to use such a method to harm him? Whether it's killing or harming people, there's always a motive. May I ask, what's my motive for framing Pei Zhou? Yun Ruoyan's question stumped Xianxia, because she hadn't considered it before. Pei Zhou had indeed been harmed by Yun Ruoyan, but what was her reason for doing so? Xianxia leaned against the wall, her mind starting to ponder. That day Yun Ruoyan had clearly gone to watch the show, knowing that something was about to happen. Furthermore, she had personally witnessed Yun Ruoyan save that ugly girl who should have been doomed. If not for the fact that Yun Ruoyan was involved, there would have been no reason for her to save that ugly girl. After all, a life-saving pill was far more valuable than a lowly life. As a result, Xianxia was certain that Yun Ruoyan was the mastermind behind Pei Zhou's death. However, to use such a method to frame a man would only be possible if there was some sort of grudge between the culprit and Yun Ruoyan. But other than the conflict in the imperial territory, Yun Ruoyan and Pei Zhou really didn't have any other grudges. Based on this line of thought, Xianxia was indeed much more suspicious than Yun Ruoyan. What was going on? Xianxia's entire body trembled and sweat began to bead on her forehead. Could it be that I'm mistaken? No, I clearly followed her to the Yichun brothel, and I saw her save that ugly girl with my own eyes. But there's no reason for her to frame me. As if possessed, Xianxia struggled with these two questions. Yun Ruoyan didn't rush her, allowing her to think slowly. No matter how hard she tried, she wouldn't be able to figure out that the grudge between her and Pei Zhou had transcended time and space. Just then Yun Ruoyan suddenly felt a hidden aura in the room. That aura had appeared suddenly, only for a moment, and then quickly disappeared. Yun Ruoyan frowned. There was only one possibility for such a situation to occur. There was someone hiding in the room. That person had been concealing their aura all along, but because they had been too agitated just now, their aura had suddenly leaked out. Who could be hiding in Xianxia's room? Pei Zhou. It had to be Pei Zhou. Xianxia, so you're trying to expose me in front of Pei Zhou. Thankfully I'm alert enough. Yun Ruoyan laughed coldly in her heart. The first thought that popped up in her mind was to ferret out Pei Zhou. A man with a past relationship with the bride was hiding in the room of the bride to be married off. And this man had a notorious reputation. How dare he make a cuckold of the crown prince? The crown prince didn't want to marry Xianxia in the first place, and he had even started a feud with Pei Zhou at the flower viewing party. If that were to happen, Xianxia and Pei Zhou would be in deep trouble, and it wouldn't be something that could be easily resolved with a bit of money and connections. But there was a loophole. Xianxia had intentionally kept her in the room, a fact that Yun Ruoyu and Yun Ruoyao could attest to. If Xianxia had an affair with Pei Zhou, why would she have kept her alive? If they were to start a fight, it would only get more and more complicated, and Yun Ruoyan would be dragged into it as well. Thus it wasn't feasible. You're at a loss for words, aren't you? Even if you want to frame someone else, you'll have to consider who the victim is. Yun Ruoyan stood up and prepared to leave. As she walked to the door, she suddenly stopped, turned around and said to Xianxia, "As sisters, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't cheat on each other." As Yun Ruoyan spoke, she stared straight at a cabinet opposite her. Coincidentally, Pei Zhou was also looking at her through a crack in the cabinet, and the feeling of their eyes meeting caused Pei Zhou to break out in a cold sweat. When Yun Ruoyan finally left, Pei Zhou let out a long sigh of relief. His reputation had already been tarnished beyond repair, and it couldn't get any worse. When Pei Zhou opened the cabinet door and walked out, Xianxia was still leaning against the wall in a daze. Pei Xiao glanced at Yi Qianying coldly and turned to leave without another word. Brother Xiao. Yi Qianying came to her senses and hurriedly blocked Pei Xiao's path. Get out of my way. Pei Xiao shouted. Brother Xiao, believe me, I didn't set you up. It was Yun Ruoyan. Yi Qianying grabbed Pei Xiao's hand tightly. Why would she want to set me up? Tell me, what's her reason for doing this? Pei Xiao looked at Yi Qianying. Yi Qianying was speechless. This was an unsolvable problem for both Yi Qianying and Pei Xiao. As the saying went, the heavens were right and the time for retribution had yet to arrive. You can't tell me, can you? Pei Xiao reached out and pried Yi Qianying's hand off his arm. I can't tell you either, so you should just obediently be the crown princess and stop messing around. I don't want to. Yi Qianying cried out as she threw herself into Pei Xiao's arms. Brother Xiao, you're the only one in my heart. I know I'm not clean anymore, but you're not. So we can be together now. Let's leave this place together. Let's go so far away that no one can find us. You're crazy. Pei Xiao pushed Yi Qianying away forcefully. I'm crazy. Yi Qianying's pent-up resentment, anger, and resentment had all been released at once under Yun Ruoyan's provocation. Brother Xiao, why won't you want me? Am I worse than that disgusting Hua Hua? Don't say any more. Pei Xiao clutched his ears in pain. During this period of time he had been dreaming of Hua Hua every day, dreaming of that unbearable night. I'm sorry, Brother Xiao, I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't want to agitate you. Yi Qianying's heart ached as she looked at Pei Xiao's pained expression. We've forgotten about Hua Hua, forgotten about that ugly woman. That ugly woman is no longer here and she's completely disappeared from this world. What? Pei Xiao heard Yi Qianying's words and looked up at her in surprise. What do you mean by completely disappeared? I've already killed her. Yi Qianying replied. That day Hua Hua had secretly escaped amidst the chaos, and Yi Qianying had memorized her escape route. After the incident was over, she had chased after her and killed her. You've killed her? Pei Xiao asked again. Yes, I've killed her, so Brother Xiao, the stain on your life has been completely erased. Pei Xiao's eyes suddenly shone with anger. So you're silencing me? Brother Xiao, what do you mean by silencing me? What are you talking about? I don't understand, Yi Qianying hurriedly replied. You don't understand, or are you pretending not to? Pei Xiao's eyes blazed with anger. Yun Ruoyan's analysis is correct. You're the only one who has a motive to harm me. You want to dirty me so that I won't despise you? Pei Xiao was furious. Back at the flower viewing party, you tried to harm me, but the crown prince foiled your plans. This time you tried to harm me again using such despicable methods. Let me tell you, Yi Qianying, you're worthless in my heart. No matter how dirty I am, I'm still cleaner than a poisonous woman like you. No, it's not like that. Yi Qianying protested loudly. I never wanted to harm you. It was Yun Ruoyan, she was the one who wanted to harm you. Enough. Pei Xiao pushed Yi Qianying to the ground and said coldly, I, Pei Xiao, never want to see you again, concubine. Your Highness. Chapter 173. Pei Xiao had previously thought that Li Mo had taught him a lesson, but now he felt that it was more likely that Yi Qianying had framed him. Under Yun Ruoyan's guidance, Pei Xiao felt that both of them had a reason to frame him, and the only person he didn't suspect was Yun Ruoyan. However, the person who had framed him was none other than Yun Ruoyan. At first, Yun Ruoyan had wondered why Pei Xiao would appear in the manor, but now it seemed that Yi Qianying had brought him here to expose her. Yun Ruoyan was secretly delighted. This was the first time she had experienced the thrill of controlling a person's heart. After this incident, Yun Ruoyan realized that torturing someone wasn't just about physical abuse. The highest level of abuse was to inflict mental torture. She had once wanted to kill Pei Xiao and Yi Qianying directly, but she hadn't been able to find a suitable opportunity. She had been anxious about this, but now she was completely at ease. Killing them would be too lenient, but torturing them to death would make up for all that she and the Yun and Lin families had suffered in her past life. When it was almost noon, the crown prince's entourage finally arrived. Everyone gathered at the gates, waiting for the auspicious hour to arrive. Although it was only a concubine, it was still the crown prince's first official wedding, and the entourage was quite grand. Dressed in a bright red robe, the crown prince stood in front of the manor's gates, flanked by two young men of extraordinary bearing. One of them was the second prince, Li Qianyuan, whom Yun Ruoyan had met once before. He was also dressed in a red robe, slightly lighter in color than Li Qianxiao's, but it gave off a delicate and alluring aura. His lips were red, his teeth white, and his eyes were long and slender. His every frown and smile was a charming sight to behold. Even some of the young men present couldn't help but fall in love with him. What a demon, Yun Ruoyan thought. There was another man whom Yun Ruoyan didn't recognize. He looked younger than Li Qianyuan, but he was dressed in a black robe. His expression was solemn and his occasional smile was cold. "Brother, who's that frosty face?" Yun Ruoyan turned to her brother, only realizing that her brother was even more unfamiliar with the ways of the capital than she was, and there was no point in asking him about it. To Yun Ruoyan's surprise, Yun Maxiao actually recognized that person. "He's the fourth prince, Li Qianyue," Yun Maxiao replied. "He's the fourth prince," Yun Ruoyan exclaimed. Of the four princes of the kingdom of Li, the fourth prince was the most special. It was said that he was the illegitimate son of Li Xiu and the daughter of the chancellor of the martial world, Dong Tiehe, while he was traveling incognito. The eldest daughter of the Dong family was unaware of Li Xiu's true identity. Later, Miss Dong got pregnant and gave birth to a child. Li Xiu told her that he wanted to take her as his concubine. However, Miss Dong was a very fierce woman. Not only did she refuse to enter the palace, but she also refused to let her children enter the palace. On one hand, it was because of Miss Dong's unyielding attitude. On the other hand, due to the Dong family's status in the martial arts world, Li Xiu had no choice but to compromise and let the royal bloodline wander outside. It wasn't until Li Qianyue was 10 years old that Miss Dong succumbed to a serious illness and passed away. Li Xiu, with Dong Tiehe's approval, finally allowed Li Qianyue to return to the clan. Even though Li Qianyue had returned to the Dong clan, he rarely returned to the imperial palace. As a result, while everyone knew of the existence of the fourth prince, Li Qianyue, very few had ever seen him in person. Yun Ruoyan hadn't expected to meet this legendary figure today, and even more surprising was that Yun Maxiao actually knew him. After hearing Yun Maxiao's words, Yun Ruoyan looked at Li Qianyue again. Indeed, he bore some resemblance to his brothers, especially his long, narrow eyes. Yun Ruoyan muttered to herself that the Li family's bloodline was far too strong. Everyone with the surname Li had long eyebrows and narrow eyes, and even Li Mo was no exception. "Brother, how did you know the fourth prince?" Yun Ruoyan asked. Yun Maxiao opened his mouth to reply, but the ceremonial official announced, "The auspicious hour has arrived and the bride is ready to leave." Yi Qianying, dressed in a phoenix coronet, was escorted out by a matron of honor. Li Qianxiao had already accepted the fact that he was going to marry Yi Qianying, so he pretended to be happy. The matron of honor handed Yi Qianying's hand to Li Qianxiao. According to the customs of the Li kingdom, the two newlyweds had to kneel to their parents in front of the main entrance. Because of Li Qianxiao's status as the crown prince, only Yi Qianying knelt. Li Qianxiao only bowed slightly to the Yun matriarch and Yi Jingming. The Yun matriarch personally helped Yi Qianying up and gave her some instructions. The Yi couple were so happy that they couldn't stop smiling. Given the Yi family's current situation, it was truly a blessing to be able to establish a relationship with the imperial family. However, Yun Ruoyan felt very uncomfortable. Two pairs of eyes were staring at her at the same time, one from Li Qianyuan and the other from the bridegroom Li Qianxiao. Yun Ruoyan could sense that Li Qianyuan was looking at her suspiciously, and she returned his gaze. When their eyes met, Li Qianyuan suddenly flashed her a smile that was even more beautiful than a flower, causing goosebumps to rise all over Yun Ruoyan's body. Compared to Li Qianyuan, Li Qianxiao's gaze made Yun Ruoyan feel even more uncomfortable. In front of so many people, the bridegroom wasn't looking at his bride, but at her from time to time. Noticing Li Qianxiao's gaze, Yun Maxiao stepped forward and shielded Yun Ruoyan with his tall body. At the end of the ceremony, the bride shall board the sedan. Li Qianxiao took Yi Qianying's hand and escorted her into the sedan. As Li Qianxiao mounted his horse, he glanced at Yun Ruoyan again, but she was still looking up at the sky. As the bridal procession walked further and further away, Yun Ruoyan let out a soft breath. She recalled what Yun Moyun had said earlier. that he had unintentionally overheard a conversation between the crown prince and the second prince at the Yun matriarch's birthday banquet, and that the two of them had discovered that the birthmark on her face was showing signs of healing. As she thought of this, Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but rejoice inwardly. Thankfully, she had Li Mo as her shield, and if she encountered a ghost she would be able to block the Buddha. "Qianying's finally settled," the Yun matriarch exclaimed. "That's right. At least the Yun family can answer to her deceased mother," Madame An chimed in. After sending off the bridal procession, Yi Jingming invited everyone into the manor to take their seats. Yun Ruoyan had planned to accompany the Yun matriarch back to the manor after the banquet, as well as hand over the list of herbs that she and Qiuqiu had agreed upon, but one of Yun Lan's servants came to inform Yun Moxiao, Yun Ruoyao, and Yun Ruoyu that they were to head to the Crown Prince's manor immediately. The main venue of the wedding banquet was the Crown Prince's manor, and Yun Ruoyan's party would represent the Yun family at the Yi manor. How could Yun Lan give up an opportunity to show his face in front of the nobles? Yun Ruoyan had wanted to feign illness and not go, but Yun Moxiao had been back in the capital for quite some time now, and hadn't had a chance to show his face in front of the nobles yet. This was undoubtedly a good opportunity. Yun Moxiao knew that Yun Ruoyan didn't want to go, so he told her not to. Yun Ruoyan shook her head. Her only brother was Yun Moxiao and she wanted to accompany him. As a result, the Yun matriarch and Madame An remained at the Yi manor, while Yun Ruoyan's party headed to the Crown Prince's manor. By the time Yun Ruoyan's party arrived at the Crown Prince's manor in a carriage, the bridal procession had finally arrived at the entrance. They alighted from the carriage and blended in with the crowd, waiting for the newlyweds to enter the manor before following them into the manor. The Crown Prince's manor was lavishly decorated, something that the Yun manor couldn't even begin to compare to. Led by a servant, the party arrived at the manor's main hall, where Yun Lan was chatting happily with a group of people. The party bowed to Yun Lan, who sent Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu off to play with acquaintances, leaving Yun Moxiao and Yun Ruoyan behind. "This is the General-in-Chief who supports the Empire, General Lin." Yun Lan introduced them to a white-haired general. "This is my son and daughter, Yun Moxiao and Yun Ruoyan. Official Yun's son and daughter are both dragons and phoenixes among men." General Lin couldn't help but stroke his beard in admiration when he saw that both Yun Moxiao and Yun Ruoyan had an extraordinary bearing. He then joked, "You're already so grown up, but this is your first time meeting official Yun. Are you afraid that someone might steal them from you?" "I'm not the one who wants to hide them." Yun Lan laughed. "Xiao is under General Huang Zhang's tutelage, and he's only just returned from the army. Ruoyan's health has been poor since she was a child and she's only recovered this year." General Lin turned his gaze to Yun Moxiao and said with admiration, "I've heard General Huang mention young Master Yun. The younger generation will surpass us in time." "I won't hide it from you, General Lin," Yun Lan replied. "Xiao plans to find a job in the capital after returning from the army, and I'll be counting on you to take care of him." "Of course." General Lin smiled. Yun Lan introduced Yun Moxiao to 4 or 5 high-ranking officials, some of whom were civil and some of whom were military. They had a say in the appointment and dismissal of officials, and Yun Lan was paving the way for Yun Moxiao. "Official Yun, I heard that your son has returned. Why didn't you introduce him to me?" Rong Tianling walked over and asked politely. Ever since the incident with Rong Yuehong, the Rong and Yun families had been at loggerheads, and Rong Tianling and Yun Lan had been at loggerheads at court. Rong Tianling's sudden appearance couldn't have been anything good, but he still had to put on a front. "So, this is Rong Tianling." Yun Lan smiled and introduced him to Rong Tianling. "This is my son Yun Moxiao, who's been in the army all this time. Please take good care of him in the future." Yun Ruoyan had been by Yun Lan and Yun Moxiao's side the entire time, and Yun Lan would bring her along during the introductions. Yun Ruoyan didn't want to stand out, so she kept her head low and didn't speak unless it was absolutely necessary. Everyone only glanced at her curiously because of her reputation, before turning their attention back to Yun Moxiao. But even though Rong Tianling was speaking to Yun Lan, his gaze would occasionally drift coldly toward Yun Ruoyan. In Rong Tianling's heart, Yun Ruoyan was the murderer of his daughter, and he wanted nothing more than to kill her to avenge Rong Yuehong. Chapter 174. Yun Ruoyan, however, wasn't afraid of him. She let her mind wander off as she pleased. Of course, your uncle will definitely take good care of you. Imperial Uncle Rong said with a smile that was not a smile. Then, as if suddenly remembering something, he said, "Oh, I almost forgot to introduce them to Lord Yun. These are my son and daughter Rong Jinghao and Rong Yueshan." The two youths behind Rong Tianling stepped forward and bowed. They looked to be about the same age as the Yun siblings. Rong Tianling only had one daughter, Rong Yuehong. However, he had many concubine children. Rong Jinghao and Rong Yueshan were two of the more favored. After the polite exchange, Yun Lan didn't want to waste any more time with Rong Tianling. He tried to find an excuse to leave, but Rong Tianling held him back. "My uncle has something to trouble you with, Lord Yun. Please don't be in such a hurry to leave." Yun Lan frowned and said, "My words are insignificant. I'm afraid I can't help Imperial Uncle. Lord Yun is too humble." Rong Tianling hurriedly interrupted him. "I'll have to ask for your help, Master Yun. My son has been a guard in the city for several years now, and there's a vacancy for the general of the garrison. I'd like to fill this vacancy and I'd like to ask for your promotion." Yun Lan immediately knew that Rong Tianling was doing this on purpose. General Huang's recommendation letter had just arrived at the court a few days ago, and Rong Tianling had just begun to stir things up. "And my daughter Rong Yueshan." Rong Tianling turned to Yun Ruoyan. "She's also qualified to enter Kongming Academy. Miss Yun, please go easy on her during the trial." Naturally, Yun Ruoyan could hear the underlying meaning in Rong Tianling's words. Rong Yueshan and Rong Yuehong looked quite similar, especially when they looked at each other with their chins facing each other. "Ruoyan has always been a person who doesn't offend me if I'm not offended, but if I'm offended I won't show mercy. At that time, Miss Yun, please stay away from me," Yun Ruoyan suddenly spoke up. Yun Ruoyan's meaning was clear. Rong Yuehong had brought this upon herself and she had nothing to do with it. Both Rong Tianling and Rong Yueshan's expressions darkened at her blunt words. "Ruoyan, watch your words," Yun Lan reprimanded. "You can't be so arrogant in front of uncle." Although Yun Lan reprimanded Yun Ruoyan, he approved of her actions. She was about to enter Kongming Academy, and everyone who participated in the trial would be her opponent. The aura that Yun Ruoyan had just displayed had instantly suppressed Rong Yueshan's. It was already noon and the host invited everyone to take their seats. The auspicious time to worship the heaven and earth in the Li Kingdom was at dusk, when the emperor and empress would arrive. Lunch was just a light meal and the main feast was in the evening. She hadn't seen Li Mo or Li Qianhan this entire time, and it was likely that they would only appear when the auspicious hour arrived. After the meal, Yun Lan brought Yun Moxiao along to continue chatting with the officials. Yun Moxiao was a cheerful, humble and polite person. He knew when to advance and when to retreat and was deeply liked by everyone. Yun Ruoyan had nothing to do as she followed behind her brothers, so she bade them farewell and headed to the garden alone. Yun Ruoyan leaned against a fake mountain, enjoying the gentle breeze and the sweet fragrance of flowers. At this time a man's voice came from afar. "I have long heard of the fourth prince's great name. It is my honor to meet you today." Following the man's voice was a flurry of footsteps. "Young Master Bai, you're too polite." A deep, youthful voice spoke up. It was likely the fourth prince, Li Qianyue. "I haven't been in the capital for a long time and I'm quite unfamiliar with this place. There are many things I'd like to ask you, young masters." "You're too polite, fourth prince. It would be our honor." Yun Ruoyan heard Yun Ruoyao's voice, and her words were echoed by the other young masters and misses. Yun Ruoyan turned toward the source of the voice through the crack in the fake mountain. She saw a group of 7 or 8 people strolling through the garden. They sat down in a pavilion by the side of the fake mountain, separated from Yun Ruoyan by only the fake mountain. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, Yun Ruoyan was about to stand up and walk out of the fake mountain when a pair of hands suddenly pressed down on her shoulders. At the same time she heard a familiar voice by her ear. "Don't go out." Yun Ruoyan turned to see Li Qianhan. "Listen to what they're saying." Yun Ruoyan frowned as she looked at Li Qianhan. She wasn't surprised that the third prince liked to eavesdrop. After all, ever since Yun Ruoyan had known Li Qianhan, he had always had the air of a gentleman. When the scions of large families gathered with the princes, there was no shortage of flattery. Just as Yun Ruoyan was about to get sick of all this, someone finally asked a slightly more practical question. "Fourth prince, Is there any other reason for your return other than the crown prince's wedding? If it was only for the crown prince's wedding, then the fourth prince would leave after the wedding. If it was for something else, then he would continue to stay so that the crowd would be prepared to get closer to him in the future. To tell you the truth, other than attending the crown prince's wedding, I have another important matter to attend to, Li Qianyue replied. What is it, fourth prince? The crowd's interest was piqued by Li Qianyue's words. Have any of you heard of the Maleficent duo? Li Qianyue asked. Fourth prince, are you referring to the Maleficent duo who wreaked havoc in the Yuelu villa not long ago? Yun Ruoyan didn't know her way around, but she was good at remembering faces. She would be able to recognize anyone she'd met once, no matter how long it had been. Yun Ruoyan remembered that this white-robed man was the one who had gotten along well with her during the flower viewing party, and he had even spoken up for Pei Xiao. That's right, Li Qianyue replied. Li Qianyue replied, I received orders from my grandfather to come back and hunt down this male-female duo. Yun Ruoyan narrowed her eyes. The Maleficent duo was none other than herself and Li Mo in disguise. So Li Qianyue had returned for them? As the crowd pressed him, Li Qianyue told them that he already had a suspect in mind, that the Maleficent duo had left on a sword made of azure light. Li Qianyue said that there were only 5 people in the entire Li kingdom who could do so, and that he would investigate them one by one. As for who they were, Li Qianyue refused to say. Yun Ruoyan turned to look at Li Qianhan. He was also peering into the pavilion through a crack in the window. Both of them had concealed their auras so no one in the pavilion could detect them. Since Li Qianhan was working for Li Mo, Yun Ruoyan knew that he would definitely inform Li Mo of the matter, so she didn't have to worry about it. As long as Li Mo was around, Yun Ruoyan didn't have to worry about anything. It was a wonderful feeling. Li Qianyue's group of 7 or 8 sat in the pavilion for about 15 minutes before they left. Third prince, how well do you know your younger brother? Yun Ruoyan asked but didn't receive a reply. When she turned around, she found that Li Qianhan had left without a sound. He didn't even say a word before he left. Yun Ruoyan was speechless. Soon night fell and the emperor and empress finally arrived, followed by the slaughtering king. Li Qianhan didn't follow by Li Mo's side, and Yun Ruoyan didn't see him for the rest of the night. The next day Yun Ruoyan heard that the Yuelu villa had been robbed again, this time of their wealth. Yun Ruoyan guessed that Li Qianhan had done it to mislead the public. Everyone in the main hall stood close to one another, and although it was crowded it wasn't chaotic. Because of the presence of the emperor, empress and slaughtering king, everyone was quiet. Finally, when the ceremony was over, the crown prince and Yi Qianying were sent into the bridal chamber. After exchanging a few pleasantries, the emperor and empress left. As the banquet began, everyone began to drink and laugh. Yun Ruoyan took advantage of the chaos to leave the main hall for some fresh air. She hid in a quiet corner, leaning against the railing as she gazed at the moon's reflection in the water. She heard footsteps behind her and they sounded unfamiliar. Yun Ruoyan turned around to see a bewitching smile. Li Qianyuan. In front of the Yi Manor, Li Qianyuan's smile had left a deep impression on Yun Ruoyan, and it wasn't a good one. Yun Ruoyan was a straight woman at heart, and she couldn't accept a man who was even more feminine than she was. Just as Yun Ruoyan was in a daze, Li Qianyuan walked up to her. Miss Yun, your dress is so beautiful. May I ask which boutique it's from? Yun Ruoyan was just about to bow and say a few more pleasantries before leaving when Li Qianyuan suddenly asked about her dress. I don't know which boutique it was from, but the slaughtering king gave it to me. Yun Ruoyan didn't want to waste any more time, so she brought up Li Mo. Li Qianyuan frowned imperceptibly before smiling. I didn't expect you to have such good taste, uncle who never changes his clothes. Li Mo always wore a black robe and even if he changed it, it wouldn't make a difference. In fact, he really did look like he never changed his clothes. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but smile. It's just that your veil isn't a good match, Li Qianyuan commented. Yun Ruoyan was wearing a phoenix floral veil today, and it matched her dress perfectly both in color and style. The highlight of your dress is the hundreds of flowers embroidered on your sleeves and skirt. If your veil were to match the flowers in a butterfly pattern, it would be perfect, Li Qianyuan explained. You're right, second prince. The people of the Li kingdom were very particular about their attire, and Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but feel ashamed of herself. In the Great Hall, the officials, knowing that Li Mo wouldn't lose his cool over such a joyous occasion, bravely toasted him. Li Mo calmly drank a round of wine before raising his head to see Yun Ruoyan sneaking out of the hall. When someone toasted him again, Li Mo's face darkened and the officials who were used to his face immediately stopped toasting him. Li Mo also walked out of the Great Hall. Following Yun Ruoyan's scent, he found her leaning against the railing, laughing and chatting with Li Qianyuan. Li Mo's face darkened once more. How could this woman be so careless? Had she completely ignored his previous warning? Chapter 175. Yun Ruoyan had to admit that Li Qianyuan was quite a conversationalist. Even with someone as slow as Yun Ruoyan, he was able to bring her up to the topic of clothing, flowers, and from flowers to the food in the capital. Under Li Qianxiao's incessant chatter, Yun Ruoyan found that it wasn't so easy to find an excuse to leave. What's making you so happy? Tell me. Just then Li Mo walked over from the corner of the corridor. Li Mo's hands were clasped behind his back, and his face was even more indistinct in the dark. But just from his voice, Yun Ruoyan could tell that he was unhappy again. Uncle. Li Qianyuan bowed to Li Mo. Li Mo raised a hand to dismiss him. Yun Ruoyan leaned against the railing and smiled at Li Mo, with no intention of bowing at all. Li Qianyuan wasn't the least bit surprised by Yun Ruoyan's rude behavior. It was clear that he knew of the special relationship between Yun Ruoyan and Li Mo. I have something to discuss with Miss Yun. You may leave now, Li Mo ordered. Li Qianyuan glanced at Yun Ruoyan once more before bowing and retreating. When Li Qianyuan's figure disappeared around the corner, Li Mo walked up to Yun Ruoyan and looked at her. Are you going to ignore what I said to you again? Slaughtering King, I wouldn't dare. Yun Ruoyan knew that the man was trying to make things difficult for her, so she ignored him and turned to look at the moon. Li Mo looked at Yun Ruoyan's back under the moonlight and sighed. He walked up to her side. This second prince is quite shrewd, so don't get too close to him. I didn't get too close to him. Yun Ruoyan turned to Li Mo. I can't just turn around and leave as soon as he walks over, can I? Can you be a little more reasonable? What do you mean, turn around and leave as soon as he arrives? I've been watching the two of you chatting and laughing for quite some time now, Li Mo replied. You were peeking? Yun Ruoyan looked at Li Mo in surprise. It seemed that Li Qianhan wasn't the only eavesdropper. What do you mean by peeping? I was just standing there and happened to see you, Li Mo immediately retorted. The two of them were very close to each other, and Yun Ruoyan could see Li Moying's face through the moonlight. His skin was originally very white, but now it seemed even whiter because of his anger. Yun Ruoyan suddenly realized that this seemingly mysterious and powerful man was only in his 20s. It was only because of the rumors surrounding him, his aloof demeanor, and his dark attire that people often forgot about his age. If one were to ignore his status, Li Mo was actually just an unmarried young man in his 20s. In comparison, Yun Ruoyan was an old monster with more than 30 years of memories. Li Mo, I'll be entering Kongming Academy in 2 days, and I'm planning to focus on my cultivation. I won't be able to see you again, so can we not fight? As an elder, Yun Ruoyan was willing to compromise. All right, we won't quarrel. Li Mo continued. I'll give you a list of names that you'll have to stay away from. Oh my God. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but cry out as Li Mo pulled her into his embrace. The people in the capital are far scarier than the magical beasts in the imperial territory. Li Mo's voice rang out by Yun Ruoyan's ear. And those women in the Yun manor can't compare to them, so you have to be careful. Sensing Li Mo's concern, Yun Ruoyan's stiff body relaxed. She patted Li Mo's back. I know. The location of Kongming Academy's trial has always only been revealed on the day of the trial. Although I've tried my best, I haven't been able to pry open the mouths of those old fellows, so you'll have to rely on yourself when the time comes. The old fellows Li Mo was referring to were likely people of high status within Kongming Academy. Right, I understand. Yun Ruoyan leaned against Li Mo's chest, listening to his heartbeat. Li Mo lifted Yun Ruoyan's hand and removed the spatial ring from her finger. Give this to me for now and I'll deliver it to you tomorrow night. Yun Ruoyan guessed that Li Mo was intending to give her something, but because it wasn't convenient for him to do so, he took the ring and placed the item inside before handing it back to her. I can make my own spiritual pills and I've prepared quite a few things for myself. Yun Ruoyan instinctively wanted to refuse. She already owed Li Mo far too much, and she really wouldn't be able to repay him if this continued. This made her feel a great deal of pressure. Can your things compare to mine? Li Mo asked sternly. Surviving the trial in one piece is the most important thing. Li Mo's words and his serious expression made Yun Ruoyan, who had always been quite relaxed, feel a little nervous. Is this trial really as frightening as the legends make it out to be? Have you been inside before? Yun Ruoyan asked. Li Mo told her that the trial itself wasn't that frightening, and the beasts within weren't much stronger than those in the imperial territory. What was frightening was the participants. There was no limit to the number of participants who could participate in the trial. As long as one could survive 10 days in the imperial territory, one would qualify. However, Kongming Academy's trial had a limited number of participants, and as a result, there would often be fights and killings for the spots. Li Mo had once participated in the trial with the intention of training himself, and he had personally witnessed how the scions of different kingdoms and clans plotted against one another. After entering the trial, it's best if you can form a team, but you must remember that there's often no one you can trust but yourself, Li Mo told Yun Ruoyan seriously. Compared to Li Mo's words, Yun Ruoyan trusted her own team more. She trusted the Lin siblings and she trusted Zhou Yifeng. They had gone through life and death situations together in the imperial territory, and Yun Ruoyan believed that they would be able to face the trials together as one. Naturally, Yun Ruoyan wouldn't tell Li Mo this. Instead she repeated, I know. In the crown prince's bridal chamber, Yi Qianying sat on the bed, her head covered by a veil as she awaited Li Qianxiao's arrival. Li Qianxiao had been forced into a drunken stupor by the princes and officials, but he was still conscious enough to not fall asleep. As he stared at Yi Qianying in front of him, he couldn't help but think of Yun Ruoyan. When Li Qianxiao saw Yun Ruoyan again, he found that she was different from the one he had seen at the Yun matriarch's birthday banquet. She grew up, grew taller, and her figure gradually filled out. She also gradually revealed her womanliness. Yun Ruoyan still wore a veil on her face, but her face was even whiter than before. Even though she was hidden in the crowd, Li Qianxiao was still attracted to her at first glance. Li Qianxiao couldn't help but think back to the first time he had seen Yun Ruoyan in front of the Yun manor. She had knelt there, dressed in a pink gown and wearing a veil embroidered with phoenix petals, making her already small face seem even more adorable. Later, when he saw the birthmark on Yun Ruoyan's face on his way home, he felt as if he'd been deceived by her. From then on, Li Qianxiao had begun to hate Yun Ruoyan. Whenever he saw her, he would think of her birthmark. However, during the Yun matriarch's birthday banquet, Li Qianxiao once again saw Yun Ruoyan's veil fall off. What shocked him was that the birthmark on Yun Ruoyan's face had actually healed. Yun Ruoyan hadn't lied to him, but he had been too cowardly to believe her. Li Qianxiao regretted his decision. If only he hadn't been frightened back then and had instead chosen to trust Yun Ruoyan, the person sitting in front of him would be Yun Ruoyan. Li Qianxiao's thoughts were a mess and his eyes were glazed over. Gradually he couldn't tell who the person sitting in front of him was. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have doubted you. In this world, only a woman as beautiful as you is fit to be my consort. Li Qianxiao sat down next to Yi Qianying and mumbled, When I become the emperor in the future, you'll be the only one worthy of being my empress. Our child will be the crown prince of the Li kingdom, the future emperor Li. As he spoke, Li Qianxiao removed Yi Qianying's veil. In Li Qianxiao's eyes, Yi Qianying's face had become that of Yun Ruoyan without her veil. Li Qianxiao's gaze grew hotter and hotter and he pushed Yi Qianying down onto the floor. As he spoke, his words were filled with love and tenderness. Yi Qianying had initially been confused by Li Qianxiao's unusual behavior and words, but she had slowly begun to shy away from him. She had been repeatedly humiliated by Pei Zhou and Yun Ruoyan during the day, and she had thought that she would have to face the crown prince who hated her at night. What she hadn't expected was that not only did the crown prince not hate her, but he actually liked her and treated her so gently. At this point, no matter how unwilling she was, Yi Qianying had no choice but to let go of Pei Zhou. Perhaps the crown prince's manor really could be her home. Just as Yi Qianying was thinking this, she heard Li Qianxiao begin to call out a name. Because of his passion and drunkenness, his words were muffled and she couldn't hear him clearly. Your Highness, who are you calling? Yi Qianying asked. Yun Yun. Yun what? Yun Ruoyan. Li Qianxiao finally managed to call out her name. And I like you. I like you and I like you as well. Once you marry me, you'll be the crown prince's consort. You can do whatever you want with that Yi Qianying. As soon as Li Qianxiao said this, Yi Qianying felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Whatever feelings she had just had froze in place. Why? Yun Ruoyan, why do you have to fight with me for everything? You've already taken Paizio and now you're going to take the crown prince as well. Yi Qianying gripped the bedsheets tightly as if trying to wring water out of them. Li Qianxiao continued to call out Yun Ruoyan's name over and over again. Finally, Yi Qianying couldn't take it anymore. She took out a handkerchief that she had hidden under her pillow and covered his mouth. In order to prevent Li Qianxiao from being rough with her, Yi Qianying had prepared something on the handkerchief in advance. A strange fragrance rushed into Li Qianxiao's nose. His head spun and his vision darkened. His hands went limp and he collapsed onto Yi Qianying's body. Yi Qianying pushed him away and curled up in the corner of the bed. Anger, resentment, rage, and indignation made her heart feel as if it were about to explode. Yun Ruoyan, I, Yi Qianying, swear that there's only one of us in this world. Chapter 176. The banquet was nearing its end, but Yun Maxiao still couldn't find Yun Ruoyan. Worried, he wanted to search for her, but Yun Lan pulled him back and told him not to. Yun Lan had seen Yun Ruoyan and Li Mo leave one after the other, and he didn't need to guess to know that they were together. If Yun Maxiao were to look for Yun Ruoyan now, wouldn't he be causing trouble for the slaughtering king? As expected, a servant came to inform Yun Maxiao that Yun Ruoyan had been taken away by the slaughtering king, and that Yun Lan and Yun Maxiao didn't have to worry about looking for her. Li Mo and Yun Ruoyan flew aimlessly through the air. The night wind at the end of August was chilly, and Yun Ruoyan burrowed into Li Mo's robes. With one hand on his sword, Li Mo held her shoulders with the other. Although Yun Ruoyan wasn't as skinny as before, she was still tiny in front of Li Mo. A rumbling sound came from Yun Ruoyan's stomach. Li Mo chuckled. Your stomach really is extraordinarily strong. Yun Ruoyan protested. I didn't eat my fill for lunch and I didn't eat my fill for dinner either. It'd be strange if I wasn't hungry. Lunch and dinner were held at the Crown Prince's residence. Seated around the table were the young ladies of the aristocratic families. Each of these young ladies ate delicately, and their movements were more elegant than the last. In her past life, Yun Ruoyan had also attended banquets in such a manner. Influenced by the environment, she couldn't help but follow suit. However, the price of her elegance was a lack of food. How can I let Yen'er starve when she's with me? Li Mo flew westward on his sword. Li Mo brought Yun Ruoyan to a stop by a sparkling lake. Yun Ruoyan looked around, feeling that the place was incredibly familiar. Isn't this the lake that we fell into when we escaped from the forest of dead souls? Yun Ruoyan asked. Yen'er, you have a good memory, Li Mo replied. Yes, it's that lake. Shouldn't you be taking me to a place with a feast? Yun Ruoyan asked curiously. Why did you bring me here in the middle of the night? To exact revenge, Li Mo replied. After that we'll have a feast. Li Mo leaped into the lake, splashing water all over Yun Ruoyan's face. Li Mo. Standing on the shore, Yun Ruoyan looked at the calm surface of the lake and called out, Be careful. There's a fish monster in the lake that can bite. After about 5 minutes, the surface of the lake was still very calm. Yun Ruoyan began to panic and she began to pick up stones and throw them into the water. All was quiet save for the sound of Yun Ruoyan's stones being tossed, which was rather eerie. Yun Ruoyan wasn't a timid person, and she was willing to risk her life against a magical beast. But at this moment, the environment made her hair stand on end. Li Mo, what the hell are you doing? Yun Ruoyan mustered up her courage and called out to the surface of the water. If you don't come out now, I'm leaving. As soon as Yun Ruoyan spoke, a huge splash appeared on the surface of the lake. Li Mo's silvery figure leaped out of the water like a silver dragon, riding on a fish monster that was twice as long as Li Mo. That fish monster was also silvery, and the sight of a human and a fish sparkling under the moonlight was quite a stunning sight. Li Mo leaped from the surface of the water and then fell back into it. The fish monster struggled with all its might, and the waves it created grew larger and larger. After an indeterminate amount of time, the fish monster finally stopped struggling, and the surface of the lake became calm once more. Yunruoyan walked toward the lake and poked her head out to take a look. With a splash, Li Mo suddenly leaped out of the water with the fish monster in his hand, and this time the water it created drenched Yunruoyan's heart. Li Mo started a bonfire and roasted Yunruoyan's soaked jacket by the fire. Then he borrowed a dagger from Yunruoyan to dissect the fish monster and extract the most tender flesh from its body. Yunruoyan curled up into a ball by the warm bonfire, staring at Li Mo as she warmed herself. Li Mo was dressed in a silver robe and his hair was silver. Even his eyebrows were silver white and his eyes were icy blue. There was an illusory, surreal beauty about him. Ignoring Yunruoyan's stare, Li Mo took out a bottle of white fish oil, melted it and dripped it onto the fish meat. Then he placed the fish meat on the outermost edge of the bonfire and began roasting it. Because of the layer of fish oil, the fish meat wouldn't be overcooked no matter how tender it was. The unique charred aroma of the fish meat began to permeate the air. Yunruoyan swallowed, finally shifting her attention from Li Mo's face to the fish meat. Once the fish meat was roasted red, Li Mo wrapped it in a silk handkerchief and handed it to Yunruoyan. Yunruoyan took the handkerchief carefully and bit into it. It was crispy on the outside, tender on the inside, and melted in her mouth with a hint of sweetness. "I didn't expect the slaughtering king to have such a trick up his sleeve," Yunruoyan exclaimed as she ate. "I haven't roasted meat in a long time, so I'm a little rusty. I should be able to control the heat better." Li Mo only ate a few mouthfuls of the fish before taking out a flask of wine and sipping from it as he watched Yunruoyan eat. Li Mo wasn't satisfied with his performance today, but Yunruoyan enjoyed her meal. She had thought that Zhou Yifeng's roasting skills were already unparalleled, but Li Mo's was even better. Most of the large pieces of fish had entered her stomach. She rubbed her full belly and looked up at the bright moon in the sky, then at Li Mo, who was even brighter than the moon itself. She felt quite satisfied. "Aren't you curious about my identity now?" Li Mo suddenly asked. Yunruoyan shook her head. "If you're willing to tell me, I'll listen. If you don't, I won't." Once upon a time, there was a young boy who had a powerful father, a beautiful mother and an adorable pet cat. He lived in a palace in a valley where it was spring all year round and he lived a carefree life. One day, however, his kin betrayed his father. They found a powerful assassin to kill the boy's father and capture his mother. "That boy must have been very sad," Yunruoyan murmured. "Yes, he was, but he was too weak. He could only escape with his pet under the protection of a few palace maids." Li Mo continued the story. It was a cold winter. In the past, the boy would have stayed with his mother in the warm palace, but on that winter day he was forced to walk through the snow. But that winter the little boy had to walk forward step by step in the snow against the cold wind. In order to avoid the soldiers chasing behind them, the palace maids took the little boy and fled into the desolate mountains. The boy's feet were frostbitten, and the maids could only take turns carrying him on their backs. A few days later they were almost out of food, but they still didn't leave the mountains, nor did they dare to return the way they had come. The cold and hunger caused some of the palace maids to complain, and some of them would sneak away with their belongings. In the end, only 3 of the dozen or so palace maids were left, and their belongings were almost all stolen. After a few more days they finally ran out of food. The boy's frostbite grew worse and worse and he began to run a fever. Without food or medicine, the boy fell into a coma for days on end. One day when he was in a daze, the little boy was pushed awake. The 3 palace maids told him that they were going down the mountain. Then they took away a gemstone pendant from the little boy's neck, saying that they would exchange it for money to buy medicine and food for him. That pendant was the only thing his mother had left him. The boy couldn't bear to part with it, but he could only watch helplessly as the 3 palace maids took it away. The boy waited in the cave alone for a day and a night, but the 3 palace maids didn't return. Finally, he realized that he had been abandoned. At this point, Li Mo paused. Yunruoyan tightened her grip on Li Mo's waist. "What happened to the boy?" Just as the boy was on his last breath, his lost pet suddenly appeared, and it licked him awake with its warm tongue. The little boy suddenly remembered that his mother had once told him that the fox cat's blood had spiritual power and could resist the cold and heal wounds. Thus, the little boy held the fox cat in his arms and stroked its fur bit by bit. When the fox cat completely let down its guard, the little boy bit its neck. Chapter 177. Yun Ruoyan's breathing gradually steadied, and her hands around Li Mo's waist loosened. Li Mo paused and looked down at Yun Ruoyan. She was small and curled up in his embrace, her long black hair mingling with his own. Li Mo couldn't help but reach out and stroke her hair. Yun Ruoyan turned around in her sleep, her back facing Li Mo. Li Mo leaned against her back and murmured softly, "Don't ever turn your back on me. Don't ever turn your back on me." In the imperial palace, in an empty courtyard, there was an expensive lamp that was filled with night pearls. It emitted a faint white light, illuminating this empty room day and night. A red-robed Li Qianyuan was slumped on a soft couch in the middle of the room, a eunuch-like servant kneeling in front of him. "I don't want to waste my breath, so confess yourself," Li Qianyuan said as he admired his slender fingers. Fourth Imperial Prince. This lowly one has always followed the fourth Imperial Prince's request. "Every day I will come to Sweet Fragrance Garden to keep watch. All the items in the garden will also be maintained regularly." The palace servant knelt on the ground, his entire body trembling, his voice also trembling. "Servants, open the cupboard and take out the sandalwood box within," Li Qianyuan ordered lazily. Two palace maids standing to the side opened the only wardrobe in the room and took out a sandalwood box from within. Li Qianyuan took the box and gently caressed the intricate carvings on its surface. "This box used to contain my mother's favorite dress, but it's empty now." Li Qianyuan slowly opened the box. "You said that you've been keeping vigil at night and maintaining it regularly, so where's this dress?" Your servant, I don't know." Cold sweat beaded the servant's forehead, but he didn't dare to wipe it away. "Do you think that I won't be able to return once I'm sent to the Qin kingdom?" Li Qianyuan closed the box again, his slender fingers caressing the floral carvings on the lid. "You've taken my benefits, but not only have you refused to work for me, you've even lied to me. Do you servants think I'm deaf or blind?" "I wouldn't dare." Li Qianyuan's sudden harshness made the two palace servants kneel as well. "This prince does not need a servant who is blind and full of lies." Li Qianyuan glanced coldly at the servant kneeling at his feet. "Chop off his hands, dig out his eyes and cut out his tongue. Throw him into the mass grave to fend for himself." "Yes, fourth prince." The two palace servants at the side immediately stood up and pulled down the palace servant who had fainted from fright. After the servants left, Li Qianyuan was left alone in the room. He stood up from the couch, carrying the sandalwood box with the pattern of 100 flowers in his arms. He walked over to the wooden cupboard and placed the box back into the cupboard. "Mother, your clothes were worn by Miss Yun," Li Qianyuan said slowly. "When I was young, my mother took me to the Yun family to play. I saw her once and she looked a little different from when I was young. But the clothes don't look ugly on her." Yun Ruoyan was woken up by Li Mo. By the time she opened her eyes, the sky was already beginning to brighten. Li Mo had reverted back to his black-haired, black-robed form, and Yun Ruoyan felt a little dazed, as if the previous night had been nothing more than a dream. "Let's go. Why are you spacing out again? Didn't you sleep well last night?" Li Mo smiled at the dazed Yun Ruoyan. "I slept very well." Yun Ruoyan stretched out her hand and Li Mo grabbed it and pulled her into his embrace. After sending Yun Ruoyan back to her rooms, Li Mo left quietly without alerting anyone. Yun Ruoyan returned to her room and took a short nap. She groggily heard Yun Maxiao's voice coming from the courtyard. She got up and opened the door to her brother who was talking to Peony. "Brother, I'm back." "When did you get back?" Yun Maxiao frowned. I came back a long time ago," Yun Ruoyan mumbled, rubbing her forehead. Yun Ruoyan knew what her brother was worried about. She was still young and talented, and Yun Maxiao was worried that she would regret giving herself to a man too early, or that she would be abandoned by him. When Yun Ruoyan was as ugly and weak as she was before, Yun Maxiao had hoped that she would find a man to settle down with, preferably one that he could control. That way he would be able to stand up for Yun Ruoyan when she was bullied. But now the situation had completely changed. Not only had Yun Ruoyan become more beautiful, but she was even more talented. If she continued cultivating like this, her future would be limitless. Yun Maxiao didn't want Yun Ruoyan to fall in love too early and delay her cultivation. Moreover, the other party was the slaughtering king Li Mo, whom Yun Maxiao felt powerless against. Whenever Yun Maxiao imagined that he wouldn't be able to stand up for Yun Ruoyan if Li Mo were to abandon her one day, Yun Maxiao couldn't help but feel suffocated. Ruoyan, you're leaving for Kongming Academy in 2 days. Yun Maxiao walked up to Yun Ruoyan and warned her sternly. I know, brother. Yun Ruoyan found that Li Mo and Yun Maxiao were even more nervous than she was. She hadn't been nervous before, but now she was infected by their nervousness. I'm going into seclusion for the next 2 days. I won't be going anywhere, all right? Yun Ruoyan immediately begged when she saw that her brother was about to speak. Yun Maxiao looked at Yun Ruoyan helplessly. I'll be following father to the imperial court in the next 2 days, so I won't be able to keep an eye on you. I'll send you to Kongming Academy in 2 days. After Yun Maxiao left, Yun Ruoyan began to cultivate. She had to ensure that her spiritual vortex was full and that she had enough fire-attuned spiritual energy to deal with the upcoming trial. Once she started cultivating, time flew by, and before she knew it, the sky had darkened. At night, Li Qianhan came to deliver a spatial ring to Yun Ruoyan. He told her that Li Mo was away on business and wouldn't be able to send her off in 2 days. Although Yun Ruoyan didn't seem to mind, she couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Li Qianhan took out the items from the ring one by one, placed them on the table and explained their uses to Yun Ruoyan one by one. Most of the items were bottles and jars, and Li Qianhan introduced them as spiritual pills and antidotes. Although Li Mo didn't know the exact location of the trial, he knew that it would be filled with poisons, so he prepared some antidotes for Yun Ruoyan in case she needed them. Apart from the pills, there was also a dagger that could cut through metal. Although it wasn't a spiritual weapon, it had been forged from dark steel and was extremely sharp. Uncle told me to hand this to you personally. Li Qianhan took out a snow-white bead. It was oval in shape, and the protruding part of the bead was threaded with a string to make it into a pendant. Yun Ruoyan took the bead in her hands, feeling a slight chill on its surface. What's this for? Yun Ruoyan asked. This is the beast core of a fish monster, Li Qianhan explained. Li Qianhan replied, my uncle refined it overnight. Holding it in your mouth will help you breathe underwater, extending the time you can stay underwater for at least 2 hours. Yun Ruoyan's eyes lit up. There's actually something like this. Last night, all of Yun Ruoyan's attention had been on Li Mo's face, and she hadn't noticed when he had taken out the beast core. She recalled how Li Mo had expended so much effort to kill the fish monster the night before. It turned out that it wasn't just for its meat but for its core. With so many treasures by her side and her cultivation as a peak 7th rank blade master, Yun Ruoyan's nervousness quickly dissipated. Mistress, Qiuqiu's voice rang out in Yun Ruoyan's mind. What's the matter, Qiuqiu? I feel that you're too relaxed, mistress, Qiuqiu replied. I'm worried that you'll underestimate your opponent. I won't, Yun Ruoyan replied. It's just that I know what I'm up against, so I'm not nervous. Not being nervous and underestimating my opponent are two different things, and I definitely won't. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye, and it was finally time to set off for Kongming Academy. Kongming Academy was scheduled to open in 5 days, but the path through the Kongming Mountains was winding, and it would take at least 2 to 3 days for them to rest and recuperate. Li Qianxia was in charge of escorting Yun Ruoyan and the others to Kongming Academy, but just as they were about to set off, something unexpected happened. Yun Ruoyu had suddenly fallen ill, and it was a very serious illness. According to Zeylan's maid, she had been vomiting and having diarrhea, and within a single night she had lost her human form. If not for the third madam's timely arrival, Yun Ruoyu would have been dead. With no other choice, Yun Ruoyu had no choice but to give up her admission to Kongming Academy. As a result, Yun Ruoyao was left completely alone. She was frustrated that Yun Ruoyu had to fall ill now of all times, as if she'd done it on purpose. When the sun rose above the horizon, Yun Ruoyan and Yun Ruoyao bade farewell to Yun Lan and the Yun matriarch. Yun Maxiao escorted Yun Ruoyan and Yun Ruoyao toward the Kongming Mountains. The Kongming Peak was located deep within the mountains, and even at the foot of the mountain, it would take a full day of galloping on horseback to reach the peak. As a result, the three of them chose to ride horses instead of carriages. When they left the capital, Yun Ruoyan, the Lin sisters, and Zhou Yifeng met up. The three of them were also riding on mutated fire horses. Fire horses were quite precious, and the Lin family only had 2 of them. Lin Qingchen and Lin Qingxue rode one each, while Zhou Yifeng rode the other. Yun Ruoyao wasn't welcome in this group, and she was well aware of that. She rode by herself, not greeting the others. Just as they were about to set off, Yi Qianying's voice came from behind them. Sister Ruyao, do you want to join us? When they turned around, they saw Yi Qianying riding in front of a group of about 10 people. Most of them were scions of the capital's aristocratic families. Yun Ruoyan even saw Rong Yueshan, whom she had met once at the crown prince's wedding. She still looked as proud and arrogant as ever. Behind Rong Yueshan were 4 or 5 men dressed in warriors' robes. None of them looked weak, and they were likely to be her servants. Rong Tianling was the crown prince's uncle, and Yi Qianying was his concubine. Rong Yueshan even had to address Yi Qianying as her cousin-in-law, so it wasn't surprising that they'd formed a group. Moreover, the scions of the aristocratic families were clearly attached to the Rong family and the crown prince's manor. Yun Ruiyao joined the group without hesitation. Just then Rong Yueshan suddenly galloped over. Her gaze wasn't on Yun Ruoyan but on Yun Maxiao. Chapter 178. I heard you're trying to steal my brother's position. Rong Yueshan was dressed in a bright red dress, her head held high as she stared at Yun Maxiao, who was more than a head taller than her. There's no such thing as stealing, Yun Maxiao replied coolly. Whoever's capable will have the position. Hearing Yun Maxiao's words, Rong Yueshan sneered and said in a provocative tone, "You'd better be careful." As soon as she finished speaking, she rode her horse to the side, and the entourage behind her immediately followed, passing by Yun Ruoyan's party. Yi Qianying stared coldly at Yun Ruoyan the entire time, and Yun Ruoyan continued to stare back at her until Yi Qianying turned her head away. There were many paths to the Kongming Mountains and the Kongming Peak. Yi Qianying and Rong Yueshan took the main road, while Yun Ruoyan's party took the smaller paths. Yun Ruoyan's party whipped their horses and galloped all the way, arriving at the foot of the Kongming Mountains by noon. Even though they took the smaller paths, they still encountered 2 groups of students who had rushed over from all over the Qinyuan continent. Because they were destined to be rivals, they didn't interact much with each other. By nightfall, they had already entered the inner regions of the Kongming Mountains. At this rate, they would arrive at the Kongming Peak by this time the next day. The last time Li Mo had flown Yun Ruoyan to the Kongming Peak, the journey had taken less than 2 hours. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but sigh at how convenient it was to have a divine sword at her disposal. After eating some dried rations and roasted pheasant, they began to meditate and conserve their energy for the next day's journey. Because they had traveled the entire day, everyone was exhausted and they quickly fell asleep. After sleeping for some time, Qiuqiu suddenly began to call out in Yun Ruoyan's mind. "Mistress, mistress, wake up." Yun Ruoyan woke up from her dreams. Qiuqiu's tone was rather anxious. "Qiuqiu, what's the matter?" "There's a powerful aura nearby and I don't know what it's trying to do." "Mistress, you have to be careful," Qiuqiu replied. Yun Ruoyan was fully awake, but she didn't immediately alert the people around her. Instead, she focused on sensing the aura around her. If he really encountered a particularly strong opponent, he couldn't act rashly. Strangely, Yun Ruoyan didn't sense any particularly strong auras. Instead, she could only sense a few weaker ones, and their cultivation was likely no higher than that of a 4th-rank blade master. "Master, that powerful aura has disappeared again. I don't know what's going on." "There are only a few weaker auras left," Qiuqiu said. "Have they left?" Yun Ruoyan guessed. "It's also possible that his aura has been concealed," Qiuqiu said. At that moment, the 4 flame stallions not far away suddenly whimpered in unease, startling Yun Maxiao and Zhou Yifeng out of their stupor. "Not good, it's horse thieves." With a low grunt, Yun Maxiao sprinted towards where the horses were tied, with Zhou Yifeng following closely behind. The neighing of the horses woke the Lin siblings up, followed by the sounds of fighting. "What's the matter, Sister Ruoyan?" Lin Qingchen and Lin Qingxue looked at her curiously. "Perhaps it's horse thieves. I'll go take a look." Yun Ruoyan stood up and walked in the direction of the fighting. If it was just a few horse thieves, Yun Maxiao and Zhou Yifeng would be more than enough to deal with them, but if they weren't, then she would have to be more careful. As a result, Yun Ruoyan didn't rush over. Instead, she walked over carefully, asking, "Brother, what's going on?" "A few horse thieves," Yun Maxiao replied. Yun Maxiao and Zhou Yifeng were both holding lighting devices made from beast cores. Under the illumination of the white light, Yun Ruoyan could see the 3 captives that Yun Maxiao and Zhou Yifeng had subdued. Each flame stallion could be sold for thousands of gold coins, and it was quite valuable. It was the day when students from Kongming Academy were rushing to the academy, and a large portion of them came from large families. As a result, it wasn't uncommon for them to encounter horse thieves at night. "Spare us. We're just a few ordinary thieves and we only want to steal horses to sell for some money. We don't have any intentions of harming anyone," a man in his 30s begged. Yun Ruoyan noticed that they were dressed like commoners, and judging from their auras, they were only 4th-rank blade masters. Generally speaking, a 4th-rank blade master in their 30s could only be considered an ordinary cultivator. On the Qinyuan continent, most guards or bailiffs were at least 5th-rank blade masters, and 4th-rank blade masters were only a little stronger than commoners. If they didn't have a special way of making a living, they could only do manual labor. However, there were many who were unwilling to do manual labor, and they ended up becoming thieves and bandits. These 3 men were probably of that sort. This type of people was the most detestable. If an ordinary person without any cultivation encountered them, it would be very tragic. If they were caught by an expert just like today, they would often be killed on the spot. After the first person begged for mercy, the other 2 also began to beg for mercy. They said a lot of things about their parents and children. "Scram!" Yun Maxiao shouted at the 3 men. "Don't let me see you again." Zhou Yifeng removed the bowstring from one of the men's necks. The 3 of them stumbled and crawled as they fled. Seeing that the horses were fine, they continued to rest, but Yun Ruoyan was still a little puzzled. Early the next morning when they woke up, they realized something was wrong. Their flame mutant horses were all dead. They squatted down to examine the horses, only to find that all 4 of them were bleeding from their gums, and their eyes were wide open and green. It looked like they'd been poisoned. "Damn it!" Zhou Yifeng couldn't help but curse. It must have been those 3 thieves from last night. Everyone had thought that the 3 men had only wanted to steal their horses, but they hadn't expected that they'd actually intended to poison them. Are those horse thieves sick? Lin Qingxue didn't understand. Stealing horses can be sold for money, but what good would poisoning them do them? Yun Ruoyan thought for a moment. Perhaps that's what they're trying to do. "Sister Ruoyan, what do you mean?" Lin Qingchen asked. "This poison doesn't seem like something an ordinary horse thief would have. If I'm not mistaken, someone must have bribed them to poison our horses so that we won't be able to get to Kongming Academy in time." Yun Ruoyan crossed her arms in front of her chest. "The deadline for Kongming Academy's trial is at noon the day after tomorrow, and if we miss that deadline, we'll be disqualified. Someone must be trying to stop us from entering Kongming Academy." They'd been expecting to encounter all sorts of difficulties and dangers upon entering the trial, but they hadn't expected to fall into a trap before they even reached Kongming Academy. "It's all my fault. I was tricked by those 3 scoundrels," Yun Maxiao exclaimed, vexed. "Brother, it's not your fault," Yun Ruoyan replied. "By the time we discovered those 3, our horses were probably already poisoned. Even if we killed them, we wouldn't have been able to escape this fate." Apart from Lin Qingxue, the rest of the men present were more cautious, but this incident was simply too unpredictable. "What should we do now?" Lin Qingxue frowned. Without their steeds, even if they didn't sleep at night, they wouldn't be able to reach Kongming Academy in 2 days. Yun Maxiao could only carry 1 person on his sword, and if they really had no other choice, he could only guarantee that Yun Ruoyan would reach Kongming Academy on time. However, neither Yun Maxiao nor Yun Ruoyan wanted to abandon anyone until the very last moment. In the end, they decided to pick up their pace. As they hurried along, they encountered a group that had caught up to them. Someone in the group gloated when he saw them, saying that this was the 3rd group they'd encountered that had lost their steeds. Yun Ruoyan went up to ask them about it, and the answer she received was that the steeds of those 3 groups had been poisoned just like them. Some of them had even given up and were returning home. Yun Ruoyan had thought that this was an act specifically aimed at them, but it seemed that this wasn't the case. Based on her analysis, it was likely that some of the students were doing this in order to reduce the number of competitors. And such a big move couldn't have been made by any ordinary student. Perhaps it was the doing of a certain family. It seemed that the battle had already begun. Yun Ruoyan looked at the group in front of her. The 8 of them were dressed in the clothing of the Qin Kingdom. The Qin Kingdom was located near the sea, and they had probably never seen such a mountainous landscape before. Because they had enough time and because they had encountered a group without a steed, they were able to relax and walk at a leisurely pace. An idea popped into Yun Ruoyan's mind. She glanced at her brother who was also looking at her. The siblings nodded at each other, having come to the same conclusion. The group in front of them had about 7 or 8 people and 8 flaming steeds. If they could spare 4 steeds for them, the problem would be solved. However, the 8 of them clearly wouldn't do so. After all, no one would look for opponents for themselves, and Yun Ruoyan's group's current predicament was exactly what they wanted to see. Yun Ruoyan's group followed behind the group unhurriedly, but they quickly aroused their vigilance. "Brother, will the people behind us try to steal our steeds?" a rough-looking youth asked the leader of the group. The leader was a rather handsome youth, slightly younger than Yun Ruoyan, and about the same age as Zhou Xian. "If they're forced into a corner, they might," the leader replied. "It looks like they have a high cultivation and we're no match for them. Let's speed up and shake them off." The 8 of them whipped their steeds and galloped away, no longer enjoying the scenery. In less than 2 hours, the 8 of them had left Yun Ruoyan's group in the dust. After shaking off Yun Ruoyan's group, the 8 of them slowed down and set up camp to rest as soon as the sky darkened. After eating and drinking their fill, the 8 of them began to talk about the wonderful life they were about to embark on at Kongming Academy, humming the songs of the Qin Kingdom as they drifted off to sleep. As time passed, the campfire slowly extinguished and the sound of snoring filled the air. Yun Ruoyan, Yun Moxiao, and Zhou Yifeng retracted their auras and hid in a thicket by the side of the campsite. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but sigh. Those 8 sure are careless. Not only did they leave no one on night watch, but they even slept so soundly. Their cultivation isn't high either, so aren't they just sending themselves to their deaths? Of course, Yun Ruoyan's group wouldn't kill them for their steeds, but they could lie in wait for the 3 horse thieves to arrive and catch them before they poison them. Chapter 179. If they caught the 3 horse thieves, not only would they be able to uncover the culprit behind the scenes, but they could also use this opportunity to demand 4 horses from the other party. If they still refused, then they would have a valid reason to call it a robbery. The 3 of them waited patiently until midnight, but there was still no sign of the horse thieves. This group of 8 must have caught up with them. The 3 horse thieves had already killed 3 groups along the way, and they definitely wouldn't let this one go. However, it wasn't certain whether they would make a move today. As the night grew darker, just as the 3 of them thought that the horse thieves wouldn't make a move today, something happened. Yun Ruoyan, Yun Moxiao, and Zhou Yifeng felt the 3 weak auras approaching them at almost the same time. Immediately after, 3 shadowy figures sneaked out from the other side of the forest, crouching as they approached the 8 flaming horses. Zhou Yifeng nocked an arrow and aimed at one of them. Just then, Xiaoqiu's voice rang out in Yun Ruoyan's mind again. "Mistress, those strong auras have appeared again." Yun Ruoyan had also sensed the strong aura, but strangely Yun Moxiao and Zhou Yifeng didn't seem to feel it at all. Just as Yun Ruoyan was about to ask, Zhou Yifeng shot out the sword in his hand. The arrowhead sank into one of the horse thieves' thighs, but no one cried out in pain. The man looked back, pulled out the arrow and threw it to the side before continuing to approach the 8 horses, as if he didn't feel any pain. "What's going on?" Zhou Yifeng exclaimed. "Look at that man's leg," Yun Ruoyan said, suppressing her shock. The 3 of them saw that the wound on the man's thigh was emitting black gas. None of them had seen something like this before, and for a moment they were shocked. "Mistress, that strong aura has disappeared again," Xiaoqiu said in Yun Ruoyan's mind again. At the same time, Zhou Yifeng nocked an arrow again, this time with a tiger canine arrowhead. Zhou Yifeng pulled the bow to its fullest and let go. The snow-white tiger canine arrowhead created red sparks as it shot through the air, bursting the head of one of the horse thieves. There was a puff, but there was no blood. What burst out of that person's head was actually black gas. The man's headless body fell to the ground. Black chi continuously surged out from his neck and gradually filled the entire camp, enveloping the 8 people. Cough cough, why is there such a big black fog? Wake up, cough cough. One of the 8 guys who were sleeping like dead pigs finally woke up and coughed nonstop. What's going on? Cough cough cough. The people who had woken up also began to cough nonstop. Cough cough cough, I can't breathe, cough cough. The 8 of them cried out in pain at the same time. Not good. This fog is poisonous. As soon as the three of them came into contact with the fog, they immediately retreated. As Yun Ruian retreated, she took out some antidote pills and fed them to her brothers. The three of them quickly returned to where they had set up camp, and with the two girls in tow, they sprinted in the opposite direction of the black fog. After running for about 15 minutes, they finally stopped to catch their breath. Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen didn't know what was going on, and had only been dragged along as they ran. Now that they finally had a chance to catch their breath, Lin Qingxue couldn't help but ask, "What's going on? I thought there weren't any beasts in the Kongming Mountains?" "It's not a beast, it's poisonous gas," Yun Ruian explained to the two girls what had just happened. Yun Ruian had never seen something like this before. Why would normal people keep emitting black gas? And that black gas was poisonous. Yun Ruian asked Qiuqiu in her mind, but before Qiuqiu could respond, Lin Qingchen continued, "I've read about a type of medicinal humanoid that's very similar to what you're describing." Lin Qingchen said that the medicinal humanoids looked no different from a normal person, but their minds were controlled by their master. Their master was also their creator, and their master would usually use them to poison others. If the medicinal humanoid was killed, it would release its poisonous gas and perish together with its victim. After Lin Qingchen's explanation, Qiuqiu added in Yun Ruian's mind that there was another type of medicinal humanoid, the demonic puppets. However, the demonic puppets had been sealed away 1,000 years ago, so Lin Qingchen's theory was more likely. A medicinal humanoid capable of refining medicinal humanoids had to be a powerful poison master. His goal was to poison the horses, not the humans, and it was clear that he didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Presumably, he had been bribed by some family to do this. The aura that Yun Ruian and Qiuqiu had sensed must have come from that poison master. "Brother Zhou Yifeng, did you sense a powerful aura just now?" Yun Ruian asked. Yun Maxiao and Zhou Yifeng glanced at each other and shook their heads. Yun Ruian was even more curious as to why both she and Qiuqiu had sensed it, but Yun Maxiao hadn't. Logically speaking, Yun Maxiao's cultivation was higher than hers, and he should have sensed it more easily. "Why don't we go back and take a look?" Lin Qingchen suddenly suggested. "I've only read about medicinal humanoids in books, and I'd really like to see one for myself." "I'm a little curious as well," Lin Qingxue added. Her time in the bamboo garden had trained her courage. When the sun rose and the fog had mostly dissipated, the group returned to take a look. The 8 people and the 8 horses were all poisoned to death. Their gums were bleeding and their eyes were wide open, their eyeballs turning green. Neither Lin Qingchen nor Qiuqiu could tell what kind of poison it was. According to Qiuqiu, there were new poisons being invented every day, and this could very well be one of them. Lin Qingchen used a silver needle and a porcelain bottle to extract some blood from one of the corpses, preparing to study it later. Instead of burying the corpses, the group planned to report the matter to Kongming Academy and have them investigate the culprit behind the poisons. They had hoped to get a few horses, but that hope was completely dashed. They could only hurry on their way. It was already the 3rd day and the deadline was the day after tomorrow. Seeing that they wouldn't be able to make it in time, the group decided to have Yun Maxiao and Yun Ruian leave first at daybreak. Although Yun Maxiao could fly on his sword, it was extremely taxing on his spiritual energy, and he would have to rest for the journey. The next day at the crack of dawn, the two of them prepared to leave. Just as Yun Maxiao activated his yellow sword, they heard the sound of a large group of horses galloping in the distance. The group looked at each other in surprise. If they really had no other choice, they would have to steal it. Yun Maxiao retracted his sword and the group stood in the middle of the road. The sound of hooves grew louder and louder, and before long, the group of horses appeared at a bend in the distant valley. Yun Ruian frowned because she saw 2 people she hated, Pei Zio and Wang Meng. How had the 2 of them gotten together? What was even more strange was that Wang Meng clearly hadn't participated in the imperial expedition. So why was he here? Was he here to send someone off just like Yun Maxiao? Wang Meng rode at the front of the group, clearly the leader of the group. Pei Zio followed behind him. Yun Ruian's gaze swept across the rest of the group. Other than Pei Zio, she didn't recognize anyone else. The Li Kingdom's and Yu Kingdom's clothing weren't very different, so she couldn't tell whether they were from the Yu Kingdom or the Li Kingdom. The sight of a dozen or so flaming horses galloping toward them was quite a sight. Yun Maxiao stood at the front of the group, Zhou Yifeng knocked an arrow, and Yun Ruian prepared to summon the flying devil blade at a moment's notice. Although they had the advantage in numbers in terms of strength, Yun Ruoyan's group still had the upper hand. If the group of horses didn't stop, they would immediately attack. They wouldn't kill, but they wouldn't engage in battle. Instead, they would steal 4 horses and gallop away. Fortunately, Wang Meng saw Yun Ruoyan's group from afar and raised his hand, gesturing for the group to slow down. Before they reached them, the group stopped. Wang Meng urged his horse forward and looked at Yun Ruoyan. "Slaughtering King's consort, why aren't you on your way? What are you doing here?" "Don't call me Slaughtering King's consort." Yun Ruoyan looked up at Wang Meng. "I'm not yet. Young Master Wang, we were ambushed and all of our steeds were poisoned to death. We've been walking for 2 days now." Yun Ruoyan had already told Yun Maxiao about the duel, so Yun Maxiao knew who Wang Meng was. In fact, he had seen him at the Yuelu Villa's auction house. However, Wang Meng had never seen him before. "May I ask how I should address you, young master?" Wang Meng asked. "I'm Yun Maxiao, Yun Ruoyan's brother." Yun Maxiao introduced himself. "Ah, so you're the brother of the Slaughtering King, Miss Yun. Nice to meet you." Wang Meng immediately cupped his fists. If not for the fact that Yun Ruoyan had already mentioned him to him, Yun Maxiao wouldn't have found him annoying. Yun Maxiao cupped his fists in return. "If we continue walking without a horse, I'm afraid we won't be able to make it to Kongming Academy's trial in time. May I borrow 3 horses from you, young Master Wang?" "Why not?" Wang Meng replied straightforwardly. Yun Ruoyan and the others didn't expect Wang Meng to agree without hesitation. While they were still in a daze, Wang Meng had already ordered his men to allocate 4 flaming steeds for Yun Ruoyan and the others. "Thank you." Yun Maxiao and the others cupped their fists in thanks, then mounted their steeds and set off with Wang Meng's party. Because time was of the essence, the party didn't waste any more time and immediately set off in the direction of Kongming Academy. At noon, they ate their rations on horseback, and after another afternoon of galloping, they only stopped to set up camp and rest when night fell. Yun Ruoyan and the others set up a campfire and rested by the side. Pei Zio had finally stopped clinging to Yun Ruoyan as much as before, but his gaze still landed on her from time to time. Yun Ruoyan simply ignored him. Right now Yun Ruoyan was focused on Wang Meng. Why was he here? Chapter 180. Yun Ruoyan expressed her doubts to her brother, who muttered to himself for a moment before taking out a flask of wine. Yun Ruoyan took a roasted chicken that Zhou Yifeng had just roasted and walked over to Wang Meng's campfire. When the people around Wang Meng saw Yun Maxiao and Yun Ruoyan walk over, they automatically made space for them. Yun Maxiao sat beside Wang Meng and Yun Ruoyan sat beside Yun Maxiao. "Here, try the wine I brought from the army." Yun Maxiao handed the flask to Wang Meng, who took a sip. "Good wine, strong enough," Wang Meng praised. "Young Master Wang, there's something I'm curious about, but I'm not sure if I should ask." Yun Ruoyan handed the roasted chicken to Wang Meng. Wang Meng took the roasted chicken and said straightforwardly, "Miss Yun, feel free to ask me anything. I've heard that young Master Wang has been traveling the 4 kingdoms. May I ask if you've come to Kongming Academy to see someone off, or?" "To tell you the truth, I'm not here as a gift. I'm here as a specially recruited student to participate in the trial at Kongming Academy," Wang Meng replied. "Specially recruited student?" Yun Ruoyan and Yun Maxiao glanced at each other. This was the first time they'd heard of such an unfamiliar term. "Yes, a specially recruited student." Wang Meng took another sip of wine and returned it to Yun Maxiao. "Many years ago, when I was still very young, Kongming Academy wanted to recruit me because of my talent in pill making, but my father refused. All these years I've been cultivating according to my father's wishes. However, Kongming Academy promised me that I could enter Kongming Academy before I was 20. Yun Ruoyan was astonished. Talented people were just that popular. If the instructors at Kongming Academy knew that she'd become a 4th-rank pill master at 13, they'd probably give her a spot as one of the specially recruited students. "In that case, why did you suddenly want to enter Kongming Academy?" "Because of my younger brother, Wang Kuang." Wang Meng suddenly raised his head and stared at Yun Ruoyan. "My brother participated in the Imperial Territories trial this year, then disappeared. No one knows if he's alive or dead." Yun Ruoyan met Wang Meng's gaze, but she didn't react in the slightest. There are indeed many ferocious magical beasts in the Imperial Territory. Yun Ruoyan's expression didn't change. Back then I encountered a saber-toothed tiger and a high-tier demonic snake in the Imperial territory, and I almost lost my life. I'm afraid that your brother's probably dead. We also guessed that he was attacked by magical beasts. Miss Jean, who was with my brother, also disappeared. I think she was also killed by magical beast. Wang Meng turned his gaze back to the bonfire. He's my only brother, and his dream since young has been to become a student of Kongming Academy. I've decided to enter Kongming Academy to fulfill his dream. Yun Ruoyan also turned her gaze back to the bonfire, no longer speaking. Yun Maxiao stood up and patted Yun Ruoyan's shoulder. It's getting late and we still have a long way to go tomorrow. Let's go back and rest. Yun Ruoyan stood up and so did Wang Meng, but he stood in front of Yun Ruoyan. Miss Yun, did you see my brother Wang Kuang and Miss Jean Fei are in the Imperial territory at the time? Yun Ruoyan looked at Wang Meng's face, which bore some resemblance to Wang Kuang's. I don't think so, but there were too many people at the time. Even if I did, I don't remember. My condolences, Yun Ruoyan murmured as she walked past Wang Meng. Wang Meng looked at Yun Ruoyan's departing figure and slowly frowned. Jean Fei, or hadn't revealed the full name of Wang Kuang's killer, only the two words Yun Ruoyan. From this, Wang Meng deduced that the killer was likely a member of the Yun family's Ruo generation. The only members of the Yun family's Ruo generation were Yun Ruoyan, Yun Ruoyao, and Yun Ruoyu. Wang Meng's goal in participating in this trial was to find out which of these three was Wang Kuang's true killer. Yun Ruoyan hadn't panicked in the slightest under Wang Meng's probing, so Wang Meng's suspicions of her had lessened. As for who the killer was, he would have to test them one by one to find out. The next day at dawn, the party of 20 or so set off. Riding at top speed, they finally arrived at the foot of the Kongming mountain peak in the evening. The last time Liemo had brought Yun Ruoyan to view the Kongming peak from afar, Yun Ruoyan's impression of it had been that it was a sharp sword piercing the heavens. But now, as Yun Ruoyan stood at the foot of the mountain and looked up, all she could see were strange rocks and strange trees. She couldn't see the direction of the peak at all, and she couldn't help but feel as if she had been born on this mountain. The closer they got to the Kongming peak, the steeper the path became. In the end, they had no choice but to dismount and walk along the rocky path. By the time they reached the end of the path, there was no more path. Just as they were wondering what was going on, a voice came from above. At the foot of the mountain, are those students here to participate in the trial? The voice was clear and distant, as if it were coming from far away, but also as if it were right beside their ears. Look over there. Yun Maxiao motioned for Yun Ruoyan to look up. In midair there was a green sword aura, and standing atop it was a man dressed in white. Because they were too far away, Yun Ruoyan couldn't see the man's face, nor could she determine his age. However, his voice didn't sound old. Yes, senior, we are indeed students from the academy who have come to participate in the trial, Wang Meng replied loudly. How many of you are there? The man asked. Yun Maxiao was here to send them off, and he wasn't allowed to ascend the mountain. Wang Meng's group was also here to send them off, and there were a total of 12 students. Please wait a moment. I'll call someone to bring you to the peak. The man took out an object from his robes and placed it in his mouth. A loud whistle echoed throughout the valley. As the whistle rang out, more than a dozen sword auras of different colors descended from the sky. Men and women stood atop the sword auras, their white robes fluttering in the wind. As the crowd stared in shock, more than a dozen white-robed immortals descended in front of them, standing in an orderly row. The man who had been speaking in midair also slowly descended in front of them. Only then did Yun Ruoyan get a good look at him. He looked to be in his 20s. His hair was as black as ink and his face was as smooth as jade. His eyebrows were long and his eyes shone like stars. Take out your identity badges, the man instructed. Yun Ruoyan didn't know what the man was referring to, so she looked toward the others. Only when she saw that the others had taken out the wooden badge that Envoy Ding had given them did she realize that this was their identity badge. In the Li Kingdom, only those with a certain level of status would have an identity badge. Commoners only had paper identification, and the badge was a symbol of one's status. After the man checked all the badges and confirmed that there were no mistakes, he arranged for the white-robed immortals to carry one student each. Yun Ruoyan, Lin Qingchen and Lin Qingxue were assigned to 3 white-robed immortals. The one leading Yun Ruoyan was quite beautiful and she rode on an orange sword aura. Yun Ruoyan stepped onto the sword aura, turned and waved goodbye to her brother. "Brother, wait for my good news." As she bid farewell to her brother, the woman slowly rose into the sky. "Alright, I'll be waiting for your good news. And take care." Yun Maxiao shouted as he watched Yun Ruoyan fly further and further away. Only when the sword aura was blocked by a large boulder did Yun Maxiao stop waving his hand. Yun Ruoyan stood on the sword aura. Unlike Li Mo's previous attempt, the white-robed immortal didn't fly straight up. Instead she circled around the boulder. "Fairy sister," Yun Ruoyan called out. "I'm not a fairy," the woman smiled. "I'm your senior sister, so you can call me Senior Shui Yun." "Senior Shui Yun," Yun Ruoyan smiled back. "What a coincidence, my name also has a Yun in it. I'm Yun Ruoyan." Shui Yun saw that Yun Ruoyan was young and had a sweet smile on her face. She quite liked this young girl, so she chatted with her as she rode on her sword. "Then I'm not the only one who's coincidental." Shui Yun turned to look at Yun Ruoyan. "Everyone in our generation has a Yun in their name. Our eldest senior brother is Ling Yun, our second senior brother is Qin Yun, and our third senior sister is Han Yun." From Shui Yun, Yun Ruoyan found out that the man who had checked their badges was her eldest senior brother Ling Yun. There were 30 disciples in her generation and Shui Yun was ranked 15th. "Close your eyes, we're about to enter the clouds," Shui Yun reminded Yun Ruoyan. Although Yun Ruoyan didn't know why she had to close her eyes, she did as she was told. The last time Li Mo had brought her here, he hadn't told her to close her eyes. Why did she have to close her eyes this time? After closing her eyes, she could only feel a chilly air around her. Beneath her eyelids, she could sense that her surroundings had darkened. Not long after, Yun Ruoyan suddenly felt the warmth of the sun shining on her body, and her vision brightened. "Senior Shui Yun, can I open my eyes now?" Yun Ruoyan asked. "Yes," Shui Yun replied. With Shui Yun's permission, Yun Ruoyan slowly opened her eyes. Although she had already seen Kongming Academy before, she was still stunned by the sight before her. More than 100 buildings of various sizes, high and low, were scattered on the peak of the mountain. The roofs of the buildings were made of a material similar to colored glaze, which glowed with a golden light under the sunlight. It was very beautiful. Because they were high up, Yun Ruoyan felt that the sky was clearer, the air fresher, and even the sun seemed brighter. At this moment, the sun was sitting above the clouds, its golden red rays spreading across the sea of clouds. It was breathtakingly beautiful. "It's so beautiful here, like a fairyland." Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but sigh. "It's even more beautiful when it snows in the winter," Shui Yun instructed. "Stand still, I'm about to land in the plaza." Shui Yun flew past the roofs of the buildings before finally landing in a large plaza at the center of Kongming Academy. As soon as Yun Ruoyan's feet touched the ground of the plaza, the deep, distant tolling of a bell rang out, one after another, as if it had come from the heavens themselves. Yun Ruoyan looked around her and finally found the source of the bell, the tall tower that Li Mo had brought her to. Chapter 181. The 12 of them landed on the plaza one by one, and Shui Yun and a white-robed man led them to their quarters. Although the man was quite good-looking, he had a stern expression, and Yun Ruoyan heard Shui Yun call him Junior Mo Yun. Perhaps because he didn't like to smile, Yun Ruoyan felt that Mo Yun was older than Shui Yun. Yun Ruoyan, Lin Qingchen and Lin Qingxue were led west by Shui Yun to the women's quarters, while Zhu Yifeng and Wang Meng were led south by Mo Yun to the men's quarters. The plaza was rather elevated, so Yun Ruoyan's group followed Shui Yun out of the plaza, passing through several stone paths and gardens filled with exotic flowers and plants before finally entering a courtyard meant for the women. As soon as they entered the courtyard, Yun Ruoyan saw Yi Qianying and Rong Yueshan surrounded by a group of people who seemed to be discussing something. When they noticed that someone had entered the courtyard, they all turned to look at Yun Ruoyan's group. As soon as Yun Ruoyan met the two of them, she looked away indifferently and surveyed the courtyard. The courtyard was very large and the rooms were arranged in rows. Yun Ruoyan estimated that there were at least a dozen rooms and most of the doors were closed. For some reason, less than half of the students on the list have arrived this year. Shui Yun brought Yun Ruoyan's group to a room on the southern side and opened the door. "Senior Shui Yun, there's something we'd like to report," Yun Ruoyan said. Yun opened the door and turned to Yun Ruoyan. What do you have to report? As soon as they entered the room, Yun Ruoyan told Yun about their encounter with the horse thieves. Yun frowned and looked at Yun Ruoyan sternly. Is this true? Of course it's true, Lin Qingxue replied. We saw it with our own eyes. If not for the fact that our horses were poisoned, we would have arrived 2 days ago. Senior sister, we wouldn't speak carelessly, Lin Qingchen added. The students who didn't arrive in time must have had their steeds poisoned as well, so they couldn't make it in time. This matter is very important, so please report it as soon as possible, senior sister. Right, rest for now. I'll report it right away. Yun turned and left. There were 3 beds in the room. The 3 of them tidied up a little and lay down to rest. After several days of riding and walking, the 3 of them were very tired. Yun Ruoyan really wanted to take a bath, but it seemed that this wish wouldn't be fulfilled anytime soon, so she could only give up on it. When it was dark, someone came to deliver food. The food was pushed in a wooden cart. It was simple steamed buns, porridge and side dishes. Everyone lined up in the yard and each person received a portion. She didn't see Yi Qianying or Rong Yueshan at the table, so they must have brought their own meals. Usually after dinner she would begin cultivating. However, since they would be entering the trial tomorrow afternoon, Lin Qingxue looked a little nervous. Although Lin Qingchen didn't show it, it was clear that she too was nervous. In order to ease the tension, Yun Ruoyan began to tease them. After a while, the 3 of them began to feel sleepy. Just as they were about to turn off the lights and go to sleep, Yun knocked on her door, saying that someone wanted to see her. Yun Ruoyan followed Yun to a side courtyard. When she entered, she raised her head and saw a white-haired, spirited old man sitting at the head of the table. Beside him stood a white-robed man, her senior brother Ling Yun. To the left and right of the old man sat a total of 6 people, white-robed men and 3 white-robed women. Yun Ruoyan could tell that they were all around 30 years of age and were likely instructors. Yun introduced them to their master, Zhou Xian, who was in charge of the recruitment of the new students. On either side of him were Yun's uncle masters, the future instructors of the new students. The main reason for calling Yun Ruoyan over was to ask about the horse thieves. In the evening, after Yun had reported the matter, Ling Yun had personally flown on his sword to investigate the situation. Indeed, he had found quite a few groups whose steeds had been poisoned to death. By this time, Kongming Academy had already sent a group of students to welcome Yun Ruoyan, and they had called her over to ask her about the details of the matter. Yun Ruoyan recounted everything she had seen and heard, including how they had discovered the horse thieves and the strange situation that had occurred after they had killed them. Yun Ruoyan only recounted what she had seen and heard, not mentioning their suspicions about the horse thieves. As Zhou Xian and the others listened to Yun Ruoyan's account, their already solemn expressions became even more solemn. Yun Ruoyan heard them mention the medicinal man and the apothecary, but she only lowered her head in silence. After she was done, Zhou Xian instructed Yun to send Yun Ruoyan back to her quarters. The night passed without incident. The next morning after breakfast, the 3 of them began their final cultivation session, ensuring that they would be in peak condition for the upcoming trial. It was that busybody in that room who made the report, giving us so many opponents for no reason. Suddenly a voice came from outside. Yun Ruoyan didn't recognize the voice. Miss Li, my cousin is living in that house. What happened? Yi Qianying's voice came from outside the house. Didn't we encounter a few groups that lost their mounts along the way? Miss Li asked. Yes, what about it? Yi Qianying asked. For the sake of showing off, that cousin of yours ran over to report this situation. In the end, the academy sent people on flying swords, and in one night they brought over 10 students over. We suddenly had a few dozen more competitors. The Li family's young miss said unhappily. Most of the students who had arrived at Kongming Academy had encountered groups whose mounts had been stolen, but in order to reduce the number of competitors, none of them had reported the matter to the higher-ups. Yun Ruoyan's actions this time had undoubtedly become the first bird to stick out. My cousin has always loved to be in the limelight. When she was at home, she loved to show off in front of the elders. I didn't expect that she still couldn't change this bad habit after coming here. I really can't help it. We can't let her get away with it. Sooner or later we'll have to teach her a lesson. Miss Li didn't sound like a kind person. When Lin Qingxue heard this, she abruptly stood up from her bed. "Qingxue, sit down," Yun Ruoyan called out. "Sister Ruoyan, they're purposely saying this for you to hear. If we don't go out, they'll think we're easy to bully." Lin Qingxue had a fiery temper, and she couldn't stand people barking at her doorstep. "Then they're just two rabid dogs." Yun Ruoyan didn't even open her eyes. "As long as they keep barking, they'll be fine. But this Miss Li is a little strange." When she had reported to Shui Yun, there hadn't been anyone else present, and when Shui Yun had come to find her last night, no one had seen her. How could this Miss Li have known that she was the one who had reported the matter? There was only one possibility. One of the Li family's spies had been present yesterday. "Do you know this Miss Li?" Yun Ruoyan opened her eyes and asked Lin Qingxue. Neither she nor Lin Qingxue liked to socialize, so they weren't familiar with the scions of the capital. Only Lin Qingxue had a few friends. "I don't know. Yesterday I ran into her in the washroom. She had a big nose and she didn't look like someone from the Li Kingdom. Rather, she looked more like someone from the Mo Kingdom." "She's from the Mo Kingdom." This was out of Yun Ruoyan's expectations. When it was almost noon, the bell in the plaza rang once more, and someone came to inform everyone to gather in the plaza. 2 hours later, more than 100 students had gathered in the plaza. Yun Ruoyan, Lin Qingxue, and Lin Qingxue stood in one of the groups. Yun Ruoyan saw Zhou Yifeng from afar and waved him over, pulling him into her group. Once everyone had gathered, Zhou Xian stood on the dais and began to announce the rules of the trial. Only 20 students will be allowed to pass this trial. When Zhou Xian announced this, there was an uproar in the plaza. "Why are there so few students this time? I don't know what's going on, but they've always recruited at least 30 students in the past. Could it be because there are so few students this time?" The limited number of students had already made everyone nervous, and the sudden reduction in the number of slots caused an even greater uproar. Fewer students meant that the competition would be fiercer, and the discussion was filled with dissatisfaction. "Hand over all of your storage items and spiritual weapons of 5th rank and above." When Zhou Xian announced this, the uproar in the plaza grew even louder. "Why do we have to hand over our storage items? Why do we have to hand over our spiritual weapons? That's right. Everything I've prepared is in my storage ring. If we hand it over, we'll have nothing left. Stop talking. Hurry up and hide something important on your body. Stop the noise." This voice came from Ling Yunzi, who stood by Zhou Xian's side. Although his voice wasn't harsh, it reverberated throughout the plaza, causing the chatter to die down. Zhou Xian continued. "This year, due to certain reasons, only 113 of the original 200 students were able to pass. As a result, the elders of the academy decided that, in order to ensure the quality of the students that will eventually enter Kongming Academy, the original quota of 35 students will be reduced to 20. What's going on? How could this be?" Most of the crowd was surprised by this decision. "I thought that having fewer students would mean fewer competitors. If I'd known this would happen, I would have lent my horses to those who didn't have any," someone exclaimed in frustration. "Sister Ruoyan, surely those petty people won't say that we're meddlesome now, right?" Lin Qingxue exclaimed loudly. Miss Li and Yi Qianying, who were standing in front of them, stiffened and silent. Of the 113 students, only 20 would be accepted in the end. This meant that 93 of them would be unable to enter Kongming Academy, and the competition would be fierce. The rules for the trial are. When Zhou Xian got to the crux of the matter, everyone stopped talking and the plaza fell silent. Zhou Xian's gaze swept across the crowd. "The limit is 3 days. After 3 days, you'll be ranked according to the number of beast cores and spiritual herbs you've obtained, and you'll only accept 20 students." Chapter 182. Those who didn't pass the trial had 2 options. They could leave immediately or they could remain in Kongming Academy as an outer court student. Becoming an outer court student meant that one would cultivate and do odd jobs on their own, waiting for an opportunity to participate in the trial 3 years later. Of course, the prerequisite was that one had to survive the trial. Neither the imperial territory nor the Kongming trial guaranteed one's life. "Now open the trial." Following Zhou Xian's command, the 6 instructors behind him stood in 2 rows, simultaneously extending their hands to release their spiritual energy. The spiritual energy gathered in their palms, gradually forming two glowing doors. This was the spatial teleportation array door, and this array door led to the trial grounds. The students lined up according to the instructions and entered the doors. Shui Yun and Mo Yun stood by the two doors, collecting the students' storage items and spiritual weapons. As the students complained, they had no choice but to hand over their belongings. After handing over their belongings, they would receive a steel sword and a storage pouch. Miss Li, who was walking in front of Yun Ruoyan, had wanted to take advantage of the situation, but Shui Yun had pulled her out with a mirror that could detect spiritual energy. Miss Li had hidden a high-grade spiritual pill on her, and when the mirror shone on her, a white light flashed. Zhou Yifeng's tiger canine arrowhead had just reached the 5th rank, and he had barely passed the trial. Lin Qingqian's sword and Lin Qingshue's daggers weren't spiritual weapons, so they didn't have to be handed over. However, Li Mo's storage ring and Lin Qingqian's storage pouch would have to be handed over. Yun Ruoyan took out a steel dagger from her storage ring and tucked it into her trousers, then took out a few antidotes and spiritual pills, stuffing them into her bracelet. She was betting that Shui Yun's mirror wouldn't be able to detect her bracelet. Hand over the spirit weapons in your possession. Meanwhile, Mo Yun suddenly spoke in a stern voice, and it drew the attention of everyone in the surroundings. This is the Pei family's heirloom, the cloud-piercing spear. Pei Zio held the spear, which had shrunk to the size of a flute, unwilling to hand it over. You have two choices: hand over your spiritual weapon and enter the trial, or leave Kongming Academy with it. Mo Yun's attitude was even more unyielding. Brother Pei, please hand it over. Kongming Academy will definitely take good care of your family heirloom. Wang Meng, who was standing behind Pei Zio, said as he handed over the 2 yellow jade pendants and a storage ring to Mo Yun. Then he took the items and walked into the array door. Pei Zio had no choice but to hand over the cloud-shattering spear and follow behind Wang Meng. On the other side, Zhou Yifeng walked in front of Yun Ruoyan with his bow and arrows. Yun Ruoyan walked up to Shui Yun, took off her ring and handed it to her. Shui Yun took the ring and, as usual, examined Yun Ruoyan with a mirror. Yun Ruoyan had quite a few treasures on her and she couldn't help but feel nervous. However, she didn't show it on her face. When the mirror shone on her wrist, it didn't emit any white light. Yun Ruoyan smiled, but inwardly she sighed in relief. But when the mirror shone on Yun Ruoyan's neck, it emitted a faint white light. Only then did Yun Ruoyan remember that she was wearing a fish pearl on her neck. Just as Yun Ruoyan was about to take it off, Shui Yun said, "This isn't a weapon, nor is it a spiritual herb. Just keep it." Yun Ruoyan nodded gratefully at Shui Yun, then took her sword and storage pouch and walked into the array door. Yun Ruoyan felt a blinding white light flash past her and she subconsciously closed her eyes. When the white light disappeared and she opened her eyes again, she was greeted by a completely different scene. Yun Ruoyan had thought that the trial would be like the imperial territory with a deep forest and a valley, but to her surprise she was greeted by a vast expanse of yellow sand. Standing on the yellow sand, the scorching sun overhead, and the hot wind caressing her face, she felt as if she had fallen from heaven to hell. What the hell? Why did they send us to the desert? Yun Ruoyan wasn't the only one surprised. Almost everyone else was. Lin Qingqian and Lin Qingxue appeared behind Yun Ruoyan, one on her left and the other on her right. Both of them stared at the desert in front of them for the first time in their lives, their jaws dropping to the ground. In the distance, a sand dune as tall as a mountain blocked their line of sight. In front of them, quite a few people were climbing up the sand dune. Those who had already reached the top of the sand dune cheered as if they had seen some treasure, and they ran to the other side of the dune. Not far in front of them, Yun Ruoyan saw Zhou Yifeng standing there, also looking at the sand dune as if he had been waiting for them. The 3 of them walked over to meet up with Zhou Yifeng, and then the 4 of them began to climb up the sand dune. As they climbed, Yun Ruoyan saw Yi Qianying, Yun Ruyao and Rong Yueshan as well as a group of about 7 or 8 people. Wang Meng and Pei Zio's group also had about 7 or 8 people behind them, and they were also climbing up the sand dune with all their might. Only when Yun Ruoyan's group reached the top of the sand dune did she realize why those people had been cheering. Standing on top of the sand dune and looking into the distance, there were a few oases not too far away. These oases looked like jade chains that had fallen from the heavens, and they glowed with a bright green light. "It's so beautiful!" The group couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, and then, like the others, they ran toward one of the oases. Yun Ruoyan had never seen either of them before, but the girl had an aquiline nose and an exotic charm. Lin Qingxue told Yun Ruoyan that she was the Miss Li from the Li family who had been standing in front of their room, and Yun Ruoyan confirmed that she was from the Mo kingdom. The two of them ran all the way to the back of Yun Ruoyan's group before stopping, panting heavily. "I didn't expect there to be a water monster from the Qin kingdom here," the male student who Yun Ruoyan didn't recognize said as he panted. "You're from the Qin kingdom?" Yun Ruoyan asked. "Do you recognize that water monster?" The Qin kingdom was located close to the Eastern Sea, and there were many large water monsters in the waters. "Yes, I'm from the Qin kingdom," the male student replied, his voice trembling. "That's a deep-sea water monster called the Eight-Clawed Evil Spirit. I didn't expect it to appear in such a small lake and in the middle of a desert at that." The male student was clearly shocked by the sight of a deep-sea water monster. "That water monster is too frightening. Let's go to another oasis," Miss Li suggested. The Mo kingdom was located on an inland plain, and even magical beasts were rare here. She had been scared witless by the Eight-Clawed Evil Spirit. "Yes," the Qin kingdom student agreed. The man from the Qin kingdom agreed. "The Eight-Legged Evil Spirit has a strong sense of territory. This entire oasis should be its territory, and it will not allow others to invade its territory. Let's go to another oasis and take a look." The two of them didn't wait for Yun Ruoyan's group to respond before running into the forest. "Sister Ruan, what should we do now? Should we stay or leave?" Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen looked toward Yun Ruoyan. Zhou Yifeng's bright eyes were focused on the lake. "If we lure it out, how confident are you that you'll be able to kill it?" Yun Ruoyan wasn't in a hurry to answer Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen's questions. Instead, she looked at Zhou Yifeng. Chapter 183. "I'll have to see its true form before I can be sure," Zhou Yifeng replied. "Judging from its tentacles, it's quite a big one, but no matter how big it is, it's bound to have a weak point. As long as we can find its weak point, it's not impossible to kill it with a single arrow." Back in the imperial territory, Yun Ruoyan had been able to kill the saber-toothed tiger by finding its weak point. "Really, Brother Zhou? Can we really kill it with a single arrow?" Lin Qingchen looked at Zhou Yifeng reverently. Her fear of the beast had mostly dissipated. Actually, Yun Ruoyan didn't think that this so-called eight-legged evil spirit was particularly frightening, because she could sense that its cultivation wasn't very high. The only reason it had managed to kill so many people at once was because it had ambushed them all, and because everyone had been so frightened by its appearance that they had completely forgotten to fight. Even after being caught by the tentacles, they hadn't taken any effective measures to save themselves, only screaming and running away. Most of these disciples from the four nations were able to successfully pass through the imperial secret territory because they relied on the powerful spirit weapons of their clans. Not many of them were truly capable. This was also why Kongming Academy had such a strict quota of students, as well as the spiritual weapons of those who entered the trial. Kongming Academy wasn't that easy to sneak into. "Since there's a magical beast in our oasis, the other oases won't be so peaceful either," Yun Ruoyan replied. "We only have 3 days and we won't gain anything by running around like this. As long as we work together, I'm confident that we'll be able to kill this evil spirit." The other 3 agreed with Yun Ruoyan's words. By then the sky had already darkened and they couldn't move at night due to poor visibility. Thus, they decided to start the operation the next day. Only when they had some free time did they sit down and check the contents of their storage pouches. All of them took out the contents of their pouches and found that there was almost no difference between them. They each had 2 bottles of pills. Lin Qingchen sniffed them and said that one was for external injuries, while the other was for internal injuries. They were just ordinary spiritual pills, nothing special about them. Then each of them had a map. The 4 of them unfurled their own maps and found that they were all identical. The map depicted the distribution of these oases. The map also indicated which magical beasts were in each oasis, as well as the grades of these magical beasts. Yun Ruoyan pointed at the oasis they were in on the map, the 8-legged evil spirit, a mid-rank magical beast that was slightly weaker than the saber-toothed tiger. As soon as Yun Ruoyan saw the map, she began to reflect on the fact that she should have checked the contents of the bag when she'd first received it. If not for Xiaoqiu's reminder, wouldn't they have also rushed into the lake? Although they wouldn't die in the mouth of the water monster, they would put themselves and the people around them in danger. As for those people, if they hadn't rushed into the oasis in a hurry and had seen the map in the bag, they wouldn't have died in the stomach of the water monster. In a place like this, carelessness could cost one his life. In addition to the map and elixirs, there were also illumination tools inlaid with glowing stones in the storage bag. They took out the tools and sat together to analyze the map. There were a total of 8 oases marked on the map, and the highest-ranked magical beast in each oasis was also marked. The distance between each oasis was about 1 kilometer, and the oasis they were in was the smallest of them all. The beasts there were also the lowest ranked. One of the larger oases was marked with the name of a snowfield ape, which puzzled them a little. Aren't snowfield apes supposed to live in a world of ice and snow? Why would they appear in a desert oasis? Lin Qingxue asked curiously. None of them could think of an answer to this question, so they set it aside for the time being. In 3 days' time they could only kill 1 such beast a day, so they could at most kill 3 in 3 days. Beasts that they didn't understand or that were too powerful could be ignored for the time being. The group decided that the next day Yun Ruoyan, Lin Qingxue, and Zhou Yifeng would lure the 8-legged evil spirit out, and Zhou Yifeng would kill it from afar. After the discussion, the group began to rest. Zhou Yifeng would keep watch for the first half of the night, and Yun Ruoyan would keep watch for the second half. At the same time, in the larger oasis next to Yun Ruoyan's, Yi Qianying, Wang Meng, and the others were attacked by magical beasts as soon as they entered. Those beasts were a group of 20 red-furred spiders, each half as tall as a grown man. Although they looked frightening, they were all low-rank magical beasts. Anyone who was at least a 4th-rank blade master could put up a fight against them. Given that Yi Qianying and Wang Meng had the advantage in numbers, it didn't take much effort for them to kill all of the spiders. Because they were low-rank magical beasts, the group didn't gain anything from killing them. As the sky gradually darkened, everyone arrived at the lakeside. The 2 teams split up and rested in 2 different areas. Yi Qianying and the others had also found a map in their storage pouches, and they were huddled together to analyze it. The oasis they were in was very large, and there were low-rank, mid-rank, and high-rank beasts in it. With their cultivation and the help they had, it wouldn't be a problem for them to deal with a few mid-rank beasts, but they weren't completely confident in dealing with high-rank ones. Why don't we go kill some mid-rank beasts first and collect some cores? A young man with rosy lips and white teeth suggested. He looked like a pampered young master from a large family. We only have 3 days. Our chances of winning are too low if we only kill mid-rank beasts, Yun Ruoyao replied. With so many of us, we can go kill the higher-rank beasts. That's too risky, the pampered young master added. In fact, there were quite a few young masters and misses like him in the group. Most of them were 5th-rank blade masters, and although their cultivation wasn't low, they had spent most of their time training in their family academies and had little actual combat experience. That's right, we've only just arrived here and we don't know anything about the situation here. Let's start with the easy part first, the other young masters and misses agreed. Yun Ruoyao was eager to win. She frowned at Yi Qianying and Rong Yueshan, only to find that Yi Qianying was absent-mindedly looking at the other group. She followed Yi Qianying's gaze and saw Pei Zio. Why can't she let go of a man who doesn't want her? She's hopeless. Yun Ruoyao thought disdainfully. Miss Rong, what do you think? Yun Ruoyao turned to Rong Yueshan. Yun Ruoyao had only joined the group halfway through their journey, and the group revolved around Rong Yueshan. Rong Yueshan actually agreed with Yun Ruoyao's decision, but when she looked at the signs around her, she thought for a moment and said, "It's getting dark, so let's get some rest. We'll talk about this tomorrow." Yun Ruoyao still wanted to say something, but Rong Yueshan's expression turned impatient. Yun Ruoyao shut her mouth, but she was very disappointed in this group. "Brother Pei, is that concubine of the crown prince watching you?" Wang Meng asked Pei Zio, who was standing next to him, with a smile. When Pei Zio heard Wang Meng's words, he subconsciously looked toward the other side. When he met Yi Qianying's gaze, he couldn't help but reveal a look of disdain. She was already a married woman and yet she was still looking at him like that? How shameless. Meeting Pei Zio's disdainful gaze, Yi Qianying's already cold heart grew even colder. She didn't know what was wrong with her. She had been treating Pei Zio as a stranger all this time, but just now she couldn't help but look at him. Yi Qianying's days in the Crown Prince's manor had been difficult. Although the Crown Prince had never married before her, there were plenty of beauties in the manor for Li Qianxiao's entertainment. The Crown Prince had only slept with her that night when he was drunk, and Yi Qianying hadn't seen him since. Even her trip to Kongming Academy hadn't been a big deal. In the Crown Prince's manor, everyone treated her as if she were invisible. And this was only the beginning. If the Crown Prince continued to ignore her, her days in the manor would only get worse and worse. As a result, she had to enter Kongming Academy, Yi Qianying decided. Sister Ruoyao. Chapter 184. Brother Wang, what did you say to them just now? Pei Zio hadn't followed Wang Meng to speak with Yun Ruoyao and Yi Qianying. I invited Yun Ruoyao and Yi Qianying to form a party with us. Wang Meng didn't hide anything, but his actions of acting first and reporting later made Pei Zio feel very uncomfortable. In addition, Pei Zio didn't want to get too close to Yi Qianying, so he asked, "Why can't we form a party? What's in it for us?" These words made Wang Meng choke. There were benefits to forming a party, such as being able to work together to deal with high-rank beasts and venture into more dangerous places to obtain high-rank spiritual herbs. However, there were also many disadvantages. For example, the spoils of battle had to be split evenly, and there had to be a certain level of trust between the members of the party. Yun Ruoyao's cultivation wasn't bad. She was already a peak 5th-rank blade master, but Yi Qianying's cultivation wasn't high, and she wouldn't be able to increase the party's combat prowess. More importantly, there was no trust between the two of them. Faced with Pei Zio's question, Wang Meng was silent for a moment before he smiled in embarrassment. To tell you the truth, Brother Pei, I had a good impression of Miss Yun the moment I laid eyes on her, so I wanted to use this opportunity to get closer to her. Wang Meng's words were beyond Pei Zio's expectations, but when he thought about it, it made sense. Although Wang Meng and Yun Ruoyao didn't have much interaction before, if they stood together, they would be a perfect match, and their statuses weren't that different. I originally only wanted to bring the eldest daughter of the Yun family, but Miss Yi, who just married the Crown Prince, has already formed a team with her, so I had no choice but to bring her, Wang Meng explained. He could tell that Pei Zio didn't like Yi Qianying. I didn't expect you to be such a flirtatious person, Brother Wang. Pei Zio and Wang Kuang had hung out together before, but he hadn't had much interaction with a genius like Wang Kuang. It was his father, Pei Yingxiong, who had found out that Wang Meng was going to enter Kongming Academy's trial, and had specially prepared a generous gift to ask Wang Meng to take care of him. In Pei Zio's mind, Wang Meng had always been someone who focused solely on pill-making and didn't care much for anything else. Unexpectedly, he had developed a favorable impression of Yun Ruoyao. To be honest, I'm not a womanizer. But I do have a soft spot for Miss Yun. I hope Brother Pei can fulfill my wish. Wang Meng said politely. Wang Meng was such a genius that even Pei Zio's father had to call him brother. Now that he was addressing Pei Zio as Brother Pei, Pei Zio was naturally embarrassed to reject his request, so he nodded and agreed. Although Wang Meng's invitation hadn't been directly accepted by Yun Ruoyao and Yi Qianying, he was a very good judge of character. He could tell from the start that Yun Ruoyao was someone with ambitions. On the other hand, the opposing team was clearly trash. They couldn't satisfy Yun Ruoyao's ambitions. All Wang Meng had to do was wait for Yun Ruoyao and Yi Qianying's good news the next day. As Zhou Yifeng stood guard, the three of them quickly fell asleep. Not long after Yun Ruoyan fell asleep, Zhou Yifeng's voice sounded by her ear. Wake up, wake up. The monster's trying to ambush us." Zhou Yifeng's voice was low and anxious. Yun Ruoyan immediately woke up. Following Zhou Yifeng's gaze, Yun Ruoyan saw a few tentacles sticking out of the lake's surface. The tentacles were slowly reaching towards the place where they were sitting. It seemed like they were planning to launch a night attack. Yun Ruoyan hurriedly woke the Lin sisters up. By the time the two of them woke up, the tentacles were already right in front of them. When Lin Qingxue saw those thick black and sticky tentacles, she almost cried out. Yun Ruoyan quickly covered her mouth, motioning for her not to make a sound. The four of them took out their weapons and crouched in place, holding their breaths and trying their best not to make a sound. The surface of the lake was calm, and the eight-horned evil spirit's true form was nowhere to be seen. However, those tentacles seemed to have eyes of their own, and they reached toward the four of them with unerring accuracy. Chop! When the tentacles reached in front of Yun Ruoyan and the others, Yun Ruoyan shouted, "Stop!" The four of them swung their weapons at the tentacle closest to them. Yun Ruoyan chopped down with her sword, cutting off a section of the tentacle. At the same time, the other three also chopped off a section of their own tentacle. The thick tentacles were slashed and the severed limbs writhed on the sand. At the same time, the eight-legged evil spirit let out a muffled howl due to the pain, and the surface of the water bubbled as if it was boiling. Yun Ruoyan stabbed the writhing tentacle with her sword. The eight-horned evil spirit was clearly enraged, and its remaining tentacles lashed out at Yun Ruoyan like whips. Yun Ruoyan dodged backward and Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen immediately rushed over to help. Zhou Xian on the other hand retreated to the back and knocked an arrow. As soon as the evil spirit's head popped out of the water, he would shoot it. However, the eight-horned evil spirit didn't reveal its head. Instead, it continued to fight Yun Ruoyan's group with its tentacles. The tentacles couldn't be killed and they were extremely long. What Yun Ruoyan's group managed to cut off was only a drop in the ocean, and apart from causing it some pain, they didn't do much damage. What Yun Ruoyan's group didn't expect was that the eight-horned evil spirit was such a cunning beast. While Yun Ruoyan's group was discussing how to deal with it, it had overheard them underwater. As a result, it had attempted to ambush them at night. However, it was clear that Yun Ruoyan's group was far more cautious than the group in the afternoon. Not only did the eight-horned evil spirit fail in its ambush, but it was also beaten up badly by them. Because it was so cautious, it didn't reveal its head at all. In the end, it was chased by Yun Ruoyan's group and forced back into the water. "Qingxue, don't chase after it." Yun Ruoyan immediately called out when she saw that Lin Qingchen was about to dive into the water. The lighting wasn't good at night, and since the eight-horned evil spirit was an underwater creature, it didn't rely on its eyes. Yun Ruoyan suspected that its tentacles had some sort of sense of smell that allowed it to determine a person's location based on their scent. As a result, it didn't even need to reveal its true form to pinpoint their exact location with its tentacles. If they chased it into the water at night, it would obstruct their line of sight, which would be very disadvantageous. As a result, Yun Ruoyan's group didn't chase after it. Instead, they continued to wait for daybreak. They put away their weapons and walked back from the lake. Zhou Yifeng also put away his bow. Looking at the writhing tentacles on the ground, he said, "We'll have food tomorrow." "What? Eat this." Lin Qingxue stared at the tentacles on the ground and shouted in disbelief, "I won't, not even if I starve to death." As they were new to the area, they didn't dare to enter the forest to hunt. As a result, they were still hungry. Yun Ruoyan was even hungrier after the fight, so she couldn't sleep. She decided to keep watch for the rest of the night. At daybreak, Zhou Yifeng got up and began to clean up the tentacles. He sliced the tentacles into pieces, skewered them with a thin, sharpened stick, smeared some seasoning on it and placed it over the fire to roast. Not long after, a fragrant aroma wafted through the air. "It smells so good." Lin Qingxue sat up, and before she could even open her eyes, she began to sniff the air with all her might. Lin Qingxue held a skewer in each hand, munching on it without a care for her image. "Didn't you say that you wouldn't eat it even if you starved to death?" Lin Qingchen laughed as she looked at Lin Qingxue. Lin Qingxue's expression didn't change. "Luckily, Brother Zhou didn't let me see how you handled the tentacles, or I wouldn't have been able to eat them. Now that they've been made into food, I can at least manage to eat a little." After breakfast, they began to plan how to kill the eight-legged evil spirit. The eight-legged evil spirit was a cautious and cunning creature. After suffering the previous night, Zhou Yifeng had roasted its tentacles and even brazenly cleaned and sliced them by the lake. It must have been scared out of its wits by now. "I'll go into the water to lure it out, and then Zhou Yifeng will find an opportunity to shoot it down." Back in the Imperial territory, she had dared to fight the saber-toothed tiger as a 4th-rank blade master. Now that she was a 7th-rank blade master, she naturally wouldn't be afraid of the evil spirit. Given her current strength, even if she couldn't kill it on her own, she wouldn't let it threaten her safety. Sister Ruoyan. Lin Qingshan and Lin Qingxue called out at the same time. Although the eight-legged evil spirit isn't a high-rank magical beast, it's underwater. No matter how good you are at swimming, you'll still need to breathe. It'll be very dangerous for you to go down like this. Lin Qingxue blurted out all of her worries in one fell swoop. Lin Qingshan and Zhui Yifeng frowned and nodded, clearly worried about the same thing. Don't worry, since I'm doing this, I'm sure I can do it. Yun Ruoyan smiled faintly. Her confident smile was very convincing to the other three, because no matter what happened in the imperial territory or after they left, Yun Ruoyan would always be able to resolve any problems that might arise. Even if the situation seemed impossible to them, Yun Ruoyan seemed to be able to turn the impossible into the possible. Faced with Yun Ruoyan's confident smile and tone, the three of them couldn't help but believe her. Don't worry, I'll lure it out. Yun Ruoyan turned and dove into the water. As soon as Yun Ruoyan dove into the water, she immediately placed the beast core on her neck into her mouth. With the core's effect, she was able to breathe freely. The feeling of being able to breathe underwater was truly a wondrous one. She pulled out the dagger that Li Mo had given her from her trousers and placed it in her mouth, along with the core. Without the obstruction of breathing, Yun Ruoyan dove deeper into the water. About 10 meters down, Yun Ruoyan saw the eight-legged evil spirit at the bottom of the lake. Its pitch-black body was like a small mountain, and its 8 tentacles danced around its mountainous body. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.